Okay, welcome to the first lesson in Django 201. First things first, we need to create a virtual environment. So there's a few different ways we can do this. But before anything, let's go ahead and create a new folder. So what I'm going to do is create a new file here. I'm going to call it test.py, save. I'm going to go to my desktop and call this Django 201. Now that looks like it did nothing, but what I can do now is file open. And I can actually select this entire folder, and it will open it up on the left here. Now we can see test.py. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I just wanted to open up the folder on the left. And what I can do now is go to View, and I want to open up my terminal. Nope, that was the wrong one, but terminal's right there. And there's a few different ways we can do this. So let's go ahead and just collapse that. And I'm going to make this just a touch bigger. Zoom in all the way. And so we can do really anything in terms of virtual environments. We can use a pipenv, which I'm going to use in this particular module in Django 201, or we can use python-m venv.venv. We can use a regular venv, a venv. We could use Docker if we wanted to, or Vagrant, or virtual env wrapper. What I'm going to do is simply use pipenv to begin with. So if you don't have pipenv, pip show pipenv. And you should already have pip and everything because you're a Python developer and you know a little bit of basic Django already. So you should have pip. Now I have pipenv 20.11.15 installed. It doesn't really matter what version you have as long as it's a more up-to-date version. If you don't see this, if it looks like something like this will say missing, or actually, in fact, won't say anything. So if you don't see anything, what you need to do is pip install pipenv. And it already says for me that the requirement was satisfied, so now I can go ahead and I'm going to clear this, type pipenv install Django. And this is going to go ahead and create a new pip environment for me, and it's going to install Django. As we can see at the bottom left there, it says installing Django, and it's doing this little loading thing and locking thing. And now to get inside of our virtual environment, we can do pipenv shell. And now you can see that we're inside of our pip environment. We can do pip show Django, and this is going to show us our Django site. Now this is just creating a virtual environment. We're not going to set up Django just yet. We're going to do that in the next video. Now to get out of here, Control-C or Control-D should just simply get you out of there. Otherwise, if you want to, you can always do python-m venv.venv. And this is another way. Yeah, look at that. VS Code was smart enough to realize what was going on there. Then we can do, not Python, but we want to do source.venv, that's the folder name, bin, activate, and that gets us inside of here. And then we can do pip show Django, for instance. Now, I'm not going to be using a venv, I'm going to be using pipenv, but you can use whichever one you like, or again, you can use Docker or any other system that you prefer, really. So I'm just going to deactivate to get out of here. Pipenv shell gets me back in, and just to prove that I have Django installed, I can do pip show Django, and that actually didn't work. I think, yeah, we did something funny here. We need to, because I've got two virtual environments in here and they're conflicting. I'm actually really glad that this showed up, is I'm going to have to delete one of them. So what I'm going to do is rm-rf.venv. And then to just get back in, we just do pipenv shell. Now, if you run into a thing that says something along the lines of that it's already activated and you can't get into it, what you can do is you can simply close down your terminal and reopen a new one. And then you can do pipenv shell, and that'll get you back in there. Sometimes VS Code does this weird little thing where it thinks it's still inside of a virtual environment, but it's actually not. So that's just the way around that. So make sure you have a virtual environment installed. In the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and actually start a brand new Django project. All right, let's go ahead and actually start a Django project. So if I just show you the files that I have on the left here, there's not a whole lot here. I have a pip file and a pip file.log. First of all, let's go ahead and get inside of our pip environment. Doesn't matter what kind of environment you're using, you just need to be inside of it. I'm using pipenv just because it's nice and easy. And inside here, we want to do pip show Django. Now, if you don't have Django, you can always do pip install Django, and that will just simply install Django for you. I'm not going to run that because I already have it. No, scratch that. I'm going to show you what it looks like. It does nothing because I already have it. So, because we have Django, what we can do is Django-admin start project, and this is going to be TIL. Stands for Today I Learned. TIL. Now you can see it created a folder for us over here called TIL. It's got manage.py and stuff in it. Actually, what I want to do is I want to throw this into this same folder that I'm already in with my pip file and pipfile.lock. And so what I'm going to do is the same command, Django-admin start project TIL space, and then just hit a dot, and that's going to install the project right into my folder here. So it's not going to create a folder called TIL, it's going to create a project called TIL inside of my current folder. So this manage.py is beside my pip file and pipfile.lock. I just like it because it's one less, what's the word I'm looking for? Directory. It's one less directory, it's one less folder to deal with. Now at this point in time, we can go ahead and we can run our app. We can do all sorts of things inside of Django. So for instance, we can write Python manage.py run server 0.0.0.0 colon 8000. And this is going to tell me we have unapplied migrations. Now you should be somewhat familiar with Django already, in which case you should be able to run your migrations. You simply do Python manage.py migrate, and this is going to run your migrations. This just simply provisions this db.sqlite3 file for us. And then we can run our server again. We don't see that error anymore. And let's go ahead and open up localhost colon 8000 in any browser that you want, and you should see this page. Once you have this page, you are up and running with Django. Simple as that. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and add some git ignore stuff, so that if you are using Git, and you probably should be using Git and GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or some sort of versioning control, that we don't accidentally commit files like our db.sqlite3 file. Okay, so if you're using Git, we can do a git status here, and we can see that we have this file db.sqlite3. Now, if you just started using Git, you're going to want to use git init, and that's just going to create a Git repository inside of, well, not really a full repository, but it's going to activate Git inside of your project for you. And instead of what you see here, git status of just db.sqlite3, you're going to see every file in here, including your db.sqlite3. And what we want to do is we want to ignore this file and a bunch of other files as well. So what we're going to do is over here, we're going to create a new file called .gitignore.gitignore. And if I just slide that down a bit, I'm just going to paste a bunch of stuff in here. And you can get this right from the source code as well. There's too many lines to go through, and it's really just covering a lot of different scenarios. Python will often create a directory called pycache, for instance. We don't want to have sdist, var, wheels, all sorts of stuff in here. This is just standard HTML and Python settings and all sorts of stuff. But we can see Django stuff in here. Here's a little more applicable to what we're writing. db.sqlite3 and db.sqlite3-journal. That's going to make sure that these files are not accidentally added to our repository. And so if I scoot this up again, let's save that git ignore, and I can do a git status, we're going to see git ignore is in here, but db.sqlite3 is not in there. And that's exactly what we want. And so in the future, we're going to be ignoring all sorts of stuff. But for now, we just really want to ignore the most common things, like venv. We absolutely do not, for any reason, want to commit our entire virtual environment. A pip file and a pipfile.lock, that's totally fine. There's not a whole lot of content in here, and that's going to be totally okay. But if you were to use a virtual environment, a venv, then you would have a whole folder with lots of files in there that you could accidentally commit, and that just means that someone's gonna have to download a lot more content from GitHub later, and that's just a pain in the butt, and they're gonna run into versioning issues, and it's difficult. So instead, we git ignore these things. And one of the things we want to git ignore, and you can see this is actually grayed out now, is my db.sqlite3, and that's just because when I create a user, it's going to have my password in there. It's going to be encrypted, but it's still going to have my encrypted password in there, and that's no good. We don't want to put that up anywhere. We want to keep that on our computer, keep it nice and safe. So now you can go ahead and do git add .gitignore, and then you can do git commit and then your message. And I'm going to commit this, and in the next lesson we're going to move forward with setting up our first app inside of Django. All right, let's go ahead and get our first app started. So if we do this, we do pipenv shell, we get inside of our virtual environment, we run python manage.py run server 0.0.0.0. Did I miss one? .0 colon 8000. Anyways, this is going to allow us to, if we open up my browser here, Firefox, you can see that our site's up and running. And if we go to /admin, we should be able to log in. We don't have a login yet, so let's go ahead and create a login. So let's go back to our terminal, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a split here. So I'm going to have Django running on the left, and I'm going to run some commands on the right. So I can do pipenv shell to get back inside of here. And I can do python manage.py create super user. And what this is going to do is ask me for a username. I'm going to say my username is Caleb, caleb@caleb.io. Password is going to be whatever my password is going to be, and this is exactly why we don't commit our SQLite files, is because I just typed a password in there. I don't want someone to be able to try to crack that password. Whether it's a good password or not, it doesn't matter. I don't want someone knowing that password. So let's go back here, and I created a user called Caleb with a password of, well, I'm not going to say it, and this gets me into my Django admin. And now I can manage groups and users. Go into users, and I can manage just myself. I'm the only user in there. Okay, so we now have a Django admin created, a super user created. Let's go ahead and create our first app. So to create our first app, what we need to do is, maybe I can just, scoot that over a bit. Python manage.py start app, not start project, it's start app. And then we're going to call this app our feed. If we do a git status in here, we can see we have a new folder called feed. We've got a new folder over here called feed, and it has all sorts of stuff in it. Let's go ahead and open up Today I Learned and our settings, and in our settings, we should see installed apps in here. Installed apps, and just underneath the Django stuff, we just want to type feed. And that simply matches the folder name here. And in fact, if we go into apps, we can see apps.py inside of our feed. The feed config, or the app config, its name is called feed, and that's why we're calling it feed inside of installed apps. Now with this comes files, such as your views, tests, models, apps, admin, init, migrations with an empty init file inside of it. That is a standard Django app. At this point, you should still be pretty familiar with this. I'm going to go ahead and commit this, and then we're going to move on to the next lesson, where we create our first model called post. Okay, welcome back. So over here, I have a lot going on the screen. I have all of my files on the left. I've got my editing at the top right. In the middle bottom here, we've got Django running, and in the bottom right is where I'm going to be executing a bunch of commands. And at any point in time, I can simply move this over. And if you're just tuning in now and you're like, oh, hey, how did you get that? All I have to do is, to get a split screen, is click this little split icon over here. So in this lesson, what I want to do is I want to open up models.py, and I want to create a brand new model. Now this model is going to be pretty bare bones to begin with, and we're going to add to it a little bit later. So let's do class post models.model, and this is going to create a new model, a new database, or not a database, but a new table inside of our database. And we want to give it text is equal to models dot, not text field, char field. And because today I learned, this application is going to be a lot like Twitter, where you can really only post a certain number of characters. So let's say you can only post something like 240 characters. Max length is equal to 240. And the idea is you simply post what you learned today, and everyone else can follow and see what you learned today. And you can tell the rest of the world about what you learned, and all sorts of stuff like that. So let's go ahead and create a new, actually, let's skip that for a sec. I want to show you how this works. So we have this new post model. Let's go ahead and type First of all, there we go. That's a little more visible there. Python manage.py, and I'm inside my virtual environment right now. Make migrations. And what this is going to do is create a new migration file called initial. And what this is going to do is it has no dependencies, and this is simply going to say, hey, Django, when you execute this file in Python, create a new model called post, and it has fields ID and text on it. So every post has an ID by default, even though we didn't specify it. And we said text models char field length of 240. Text models char field length of 240. Now that's cool. That just made the file. That didn't actually do anything. Let's go ahead and type python manage.py migrate. And what this is going to do is execute that file for us. And you can see it says applying feed 0001 underscore initial, everything was okay. Now a little bit later when we look at these posts in our admin, we're going to see that this shows up as a funny name. And when we get to that point, we're going to change what that name actually looks like. But for now, I said we're going to tackle that, like right now. We're actually going to tackle that in the future when we get to it. So we're going to tackle things one by one as problems arise. And that's a lot like how we code in real life. So that's all we need to do for this particular lesson. All we needed to do was create a new model called post, give it a field called text with a max length of 240, and then we python manage.py make migrations, python manage.py migrate, and we are good to go. All right, let's say we want to be able to manage posts through our Django admin. So we go into our Django admin, and we don't see posts in there. We need to now register that. So what we can do is in our feed, in our admin.py, and it has to go in this file, that's where Django is looking for it, is first of all, we're going to say from .models import post, and we're saying .models, dot being this particular folder, models being the module or file. So let's close that up. Admin.py is saying this particular folder in here, and then look for models.py in here, import post. And then we can register the model in here. And registering is really easy. We're going to use a simple form of registering. So we're going to do class post admin, admin.model admin, if I can spell that right. And we're not going to add any settings to it. Not yet anyways. If you wanted to, you can definitely go take a look at the Django docs and add your own settings. But for now, we just want everything to be accessible. And there's only one field on this particular post model anyway, so it's not like we can really do too much. So now we need to say admin register site, and we need to connect these two. We need to connect post with post admin, and that's going to connect our post here, which is models.model, with our post admin, which is using admin.modeladmin. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's refresh in here. And there we see feed and posts. Now we don't have any posts in there yet. Let's go ahead and create our first post. Our first post. Save. And it says post object 1. This is the weird thing I was talking about in the last lesson there. Let's go ahead and actually change that. And that's really easy to do. All we have to do is open up our models.py. And inside of our post class here, remember indenting is important. Def str self. This is two underscores side by side. So underscore underscore str underscore underscore self, because every method on a Python class always takes self as its first parameter by default. Then we can say return self.text, and let's truncate that to be like the first 100 characters. And just wait for Django to reload. And there we go. It says our first post. And let's make that edited, save it, and it says edited. There we go. We have now registered our post model with the Django admin. All right, welcome back. We have a post and we have some text in it. We don't know who wrote this post. We'll add that later. And we don't know what time the post was created at. So let's go ahead and first of all add the date. Adding the date is going to be a lot more simple. So what we want to do here is just open up Visual Studio Code, and in our models.py file where our post is, our post class, we want to say date is equal to models.date time field. Not a date field. A date field is going to be just the day. A date time field is going to be the date, like the year, month, day, plus the hour, minute, seconds. And in here we want to say auto now is equal to true. So every time we create a new post, simply say that that post was created at this particular time. So we don't have to do anything. Django's going to handle that for us. We don't have to worry about updating it or inserting it or doing any sort of database work. Django just magically handles it for us. Now, that's all nice, and it would be lovely if all we had to do was refresh our page, but if you refresh your page and you see something like no such column, that simply means you need to change some things in your database. And to do that, we make migration. So Python manage.py, make migrations, and Python manage.py, migrate. And let's go back to our code here, and not our code, but our browser, and it works. And our date field doesn't show up. And our date field actually isn't supposed to show up. Our date field isn't supposed to be editable. Auto now makes it non-editable by default. And that's okay. We don't want to mess with the dates. We don't want to be able to edit the dates at all. As soon as we create a post, we want that date to be automatically filled. And so that's how we add a new field to this post model, or to any model really. You add a new field, something is equal to models dot some sort of field, and then you do Python manage.py make migrations, Python manage.py migrate. All right, let's go ahead and create a home page, because if we go back to our page here, and let's just get out of the admin, we just see Django's default homepage. Now, this actually requires a couple different steps, but to begin with, let's create our view. And sort of the idea with Django is a lot of things need to be done at the same time, and the problem with watching a video like this is that we have to do things one at a time, so it doesn't always make sense. But the next few steps, we're going to basically just do all of this in any particular order, and it's the end that's important. As long as we have things like URLs, views, and a template, it should all work for us. But we can't really get it all to work without all three components. So what we're going to do here is we're going to open up our feed and go into views, and I'm just going to get rid of this render because we're not going to use a function-based view, we're going to use a class-based view. And so we're going to say from Django.views.generic import list view. And we also want to, from .models, import our post. And because we're working with a post, we usually want to import it. Now let's go ahead and create a homepage, class homepage, and this is going to be our list view. And what this is going to do is simply render out a template with all of our posts in it. So let's say that HTTP method names is going to be get. That means people can't post, they can't delete, they can't do anything like that. All they can do is get a page request and see the posts. That's all the homepage does. Template name is going to be, let's just call it homepage.html. The model we want to list is post. Our context object name is usually, I believe it's object by default, but I always overwrite this to be post. And this is what we're going to use in our template, which we're probably going to tackle in the next video, to be honest. And then the query side is simply going to be post.objects.all, and we want to order these posts. Order by the ID descending, and let's make sure that we only get like 30 posts at a time. So a page doesn't load a million posts, because that could A, take forever to load, B, really hurt your database. And so this is all we're going to do in our views.py. There's nothing else in here, as you can see. Next, we need to create a new file in here. In our feed, let's call this urls.py. urls.py. And in here, we're going to create a new series of URLs. So let's do from Django.urls import path, and from .import views. Let's also give this an app name, and I'll describe this in just a second, because it seems like I'm going pretty fast here, but this is pretty much Django 101 stuff so far anyways. You should be quite familiar with this. URL patterns is equal to, and then it's got a path, a place that it goes, views dot, what was that view? What did we call that? Just homepage dot as view. Name is going to be, nope, that's not right. Name is equal to index. And so in this file, all we're doing is we're importing path so that we can use it here. We're importing all of our views. Yeah, we really only have the one view. We could import just the one view if we wanted to, but we're going to import the entire views module so that we can use views.homepage and then render that template as view, which is then going to connect over to our template name, which is homepage.html. And our app name, which is what we're going to be using for namespacing, is feed. And that just matches the app name that we're using in our folder name. It also matches this one in here. And that just sort of keeps namespacing or URLs nice and easy. We'll talk about namespacing and why it's more important when we get more or less to the template side of things. Last but not least, we have to open up til/urls.py, and in here, we can see all we have is our admin. So if we wanted to, we could completely disable the admin by simply deleting it. The admin would no longer be accessible to any users whatsoever. But that's not what we want. What we want is, we want a path that goes to our home page, and we want to do this thing called include. And we want to include like our feed URLs or something like that. We haven't imported that yet. And we want to give this a namespace of feed. And again, we'll talk about namespacing in a little bit. So first of all, we need to include, well, that's not wrong. We need to import include. We need to import feed URLs. So let's do from django.conf.urls import include. And if you're ever wondering, hey, Caleb, where on earth are you getting these? How do you memorize all of these? First of all, A, I don't have a lot of these memorized. I just write these enough that I know some of them. And B, the ones that I don't know, I honestly just look at the Django docs. The Django docs will tell me everything I need to know. So I'm just gonna move that up a line, and let's do from the feed app, import URLs, the whole file as feed URLs. And that just matches here. So I just renamed that import. Let's go ahead and save this, see what happens. No module named Django conf.url. I think it's supposed to be, where are we? URLs. See, I get things wrong too. No module named Django.url. What file are you in? Feed.urls. We're just gonna tackle this feed.urls. Django.urls. Django's just gonna keep telling me that there's a problem in here. This is probably one that you caught. Query set minus, no, that's not right. Query set is equal to. And Django's just going to keep telling me that there's problems until there's no longer a problem. So let's go ahead and go back to our page and refresh. And we should, if everything is working right, see this. Template does not exist. It's looking for homepage, it's looking for feed/post list, and it's looking for them in Django contrib auth templates homepage, Django contrib admin templates homepage, Django contrib admin templates feed, Django contrib auth templates feed. It's looking for these files in these folders. It doesn't know where to actually look. So in the next lesson, let's go ahead and tell Django by changing some of our settings that it should look in a particular folder for us. Okay, in the last lesson, Django was unable to find our homepage.html. Probably because A, we haven't created that file, so it can't find it anywhere, which is fair, and B, it's looking in weird places. And so Django lets us sort of set this up on our own so that we can set it up on our own, so we can do whatever we want with it. We have a lot more flexibility this way. So what I want to do is I want to open up this file called settings.py. And where is my base directory? Base directory. So we need to do a few different things in here. First of all, we want a project directory. So let's do project dir, and this is going to be a weird thing that you probably don't need to remember because you're not actually going to write this out too often. You can just get this right from my source code if you want. So we're going to do os.path.dirname, os.path.dirname, os.path.absolutepath __, and then this particular file. Let's just make sure I don't have any typos in there. It should show up twice. And it doesn't, because that's dire name, like dire wolf. There we go. Now we're using OS. We need to go ahead and import that. So let's do import OS at the top. That's just underneath all my doc strings here. That comes default with Django. So that's going to work for me if I hit save. There should be no complaints in the Django console down there. And then we need to find our templates, templates. And look at that, templates. And then we have this option here called dirs, these directories. And what we want to do here is say os.path.join that project directory, which is going to be exactly where this whole project lives, til, that's this particular folder over here, /templates. And that's going to be looking for a subfolder in here called templates. Now let's go ahead and open up our browser and let's see where Django is looking now. Django is looking for desktop, Django 201, til, templates, homepage.html. Let's go ahead and make this exist real quick. We're not going to do a lot of work with it. Let's just make it exist. So let's create a new folder called templates and a new file called homepage.html. Stuff in here. That's literally all I'm going to write. Haha! Great success. That is working for us. And so in this lesson, we successfully got our template system up and running. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and actually work with the template a little bit more. All right, in the last lesson, we made our first template, homepage.html. We put some stuff in there, which is great, and we put it in the til templates folder. What we could actually do is, in our views, we could change where we want to find this. We could go feed/homepage.html. And what this is going to allow us to do is move this out of our standard generic templates folder, which was needed and will be needed in the future, but we're going to move this again. So let's do new file in our feed app this time. Let's call it templates. This is going to be a directory name. We're going to give it the feed namespace, homepage.html. More stuff in here, 2222222. And let's see where Django is looking for this template first. More stuff in here, 22222, despite there actually being two home pages. So what we can do is we can go ahead and get rid of this home page. And this is where our homepage is going to live. And that's all we're going to do for this lesson. We simply wanted to move our template over to the feed app. And that just sort of keeps it nice and clean so that the entire feed is somewhat self-contained. All right, at this point we have a home page and we need to add a bunch of stuff to it. And so in VS Code, we can do HTML5:5, nailed it. And it's going to fill out a bunch of stuff for us. Our page here, home page. And when we refresh the page, it says our page up here and home page. And in our source, view our page source, we can see all this HTML. Zoom in there. That's exactly what we wrote. Now, that's fine until we need a second template, which we're going to need down the road. And so at this point, what we want to do is we want to use all this code as a quote-unquote template, and really just only change the small pieces that we need, like our title, or just the content in our homepage. So what we're going to do is in our til templates folder, create a new file called base.html. And let's do HTML:5. Base file, and let's call it base file in here. Now, again, this is not going to do anything, even though we have the file. Django just doesn't know what to do with it. It's just sort of hanging out, not being used. It's not being called by any other templates or any views or anything like that. Instead, what we can do is in our home page, we could say extends base.html. And if we refresh this, it says base file in here. This is extending our home page. So let's just delete this for a second, refresh our page. We see nothing shows up. Let's view our page source. There's nothing in there. Undo that, save, refresh, base file in here. It says base file in the title as well. That's exactly what we changed. Let's view our page source, and we are now using two template files at the same time. And so what this is doing is saying, hey, Django, take that base.html file that you're currently not using and use it. And so I want you to take all of that stuff in there, and I want you to extend from it. And this allows us to eventually inject small pieces of code into this page. So on every page, we don't need to write HTML lang is equal to English. We don't need to write meta char set is equal to UTF-8. We don't need to write meta name viewport content width is equal to device dash width initial dash scale is equal to 1.0. Because that's painful to write on every single file. Instead, we can write it once. We can write it once and we can extend from that file. And in the future, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we can just change small bits of it so that we don't have to write the same junk over and over again. All right, let's look at adding blocks. So let's just close all this down as if we're just opening this project from the beginning. Let's open up TIL, templates, base.html. And let's also open up feed, templates feed, homepage. And so our homepage is extending from this base.html. And what I can do is split this as well. So we've got base on the right and we've got homepage on the left. And let's see if I can make this just a tad smaller. Hopefully this is still viewable for you. Hopefully you're not on a very small phone. But yeah, moving forward. Let's say we wanted to change this title. What we could do is we could add this thing called a block. And so it looks like this. Block, title, end block. And that's all we're going to do. Now we're going to actually literally copy that. So let's right click, copy. Let's go over here, paste, and we can change the title of this page. Changed the title of the home page. And we can see, unclosed tag. What are we looking for here? And that is because I, in fact, have a typo. Right here and right there, I need to have a %sign. And so this is what a block looks like. In fact, that's a good reason, I guess, for me to explain the syntax here. So we use a curly brace or a mustache brace, %sign, the keyword block, and then the name of it. And that matches right in here. Then we close that with the exact opposite. So a %sign and then the closing curly brace. Put our content on the inside, all of this stuff. And then we say, with the same opening and closing syntax, end block. And so this opening tag matches this opening tag, and this closing tag matches this closing tag. And if you ever wanted a default, you can say default title in here. Now let's go ahead and add some body. So in our page, we want to do something with this body. So we can say this is extending from base.html, but let's also create a block in here. A block, let's call it body, and end block. Make sure I got that %sign so I don't make that same mistake twice. Copy, paste it over here, and this is going to be from the home page. That didn't work for me because I didn't save base.html. Let's try that again, and hopefully this boom is correct. Boom! There we go, it actually worked. This is extending from base.html, so this is going to be put on every single page, and this is going to be from the home page, and that's what I wrote here. And so if I ever wanted to change that, I can do that here. Now in the future, if you have other views rendering other templates, instead of writing all of this stuff, all we have to do is extend from base and just inject the block title and the block body or any other blocks. Thing is though, they have to match. You have to have a block body, you have to have a block body. You have to have an end block, you have to have an end block. And Django will tell you if there's any sort of syntax error, it can't figure things out. It'll tell you right up front and be very honest and blunt with you. So it'll at least let you know what's going on. All right, let's go ahead and loop through a bunch of our posts here. So if we open up our browser, it just says this is going to be from the home page, and it's not actually looping through any of our posts. We need to add these posts in here. Now, we did some of the setup a little bit earlier where we had our home page is a list view. It's going to list all of our posts, and the query set, the things that we want to post or loop on our page, is going to be all the posts.objects.all ordered by the most recent and only show 0 to 30. So the first 30. And then we said this context object name is going to be posts. And that's important because if we go to our home page here, what we can do is in our body, and let's just get rid of this, we can say for post in posts, that's where we're getting that context object name. Context object name is equal to posts, and that shows up right there. And this is just a regular loop, just like in Python or JavaScript, a regular for loop. And then we say end for. And in here, we're going to have access to every post. Now, that post is going to loop through everything in this query set, all of those posts, and each one of those is going to be one of these, a post model. So it's got text and it has date in it as well. So let's go ahead and just show post.text, and it was written at post.date. And look at that, our first post, edited is what it was called, written at, or on rather, should have said on, January 6th, 2021 at clearly not the right time, as my computer time is different from my server time. That's okay, we can set the server time later, that's not a big deal. Let's go ahead and open up our admin and let's create a couple more posts. And so let's just go to /admin, and this is the second post. Save and add another. This is the newest post. Save and yeah, that's it. So we have 3 posts in there now. And we can see that it shows up in here. This is the newest post. This is the second post and our first post. Let's go ahead and actually separate that with something like a horizontal rule. There we go. So now it actually shows our posts. That's literally all we have to do at this point, because we did all the heavy lifting in our views. We set up our models so that data can be stored in our database. In our views, we said, hey, this is going to be a list view. Use the template called feed/homepage. That's going to be in here, so it's sort of self-contained. The model that we're going to list through is the post model. The context object name is going to be used right there. And the query set, what we want to be able to loop through is this. And that's going to get all of our posts, .objects, .all of them. And again, it's going to order them reverse ID. If we wanted to order them from oldest newest, we would say order by ID. Instead, we're going to say order by ID oldest to newest. No, that's the wrong way of saying it. Newest to oldest, that's better. And then just chop that. Get the very first one all the way to the 30th one. And in our template, we just simply said for every post, in those posts, show us that text that comes from our model's text. And it was written on this date. And that's all there is to it. All right, let's go ahead and add, well, some form of login system to our site. Now this is going to take up multiple steps, and if I just open up Firefox again, there's no login page, there's no logout page, no password reset page, and there is a really, really easy way to do this, and it's a third-party package called Django All-Auth. And so what we're going to do is install that now. So inside of our pip environment, our pip env, we can do pip install Django-all-auth, or if we wanted to, let's get out of this. We could do pip env install Django-all-auth. And this is going to go ahead and install Django all-auth for us. So we just give that a quick second, and that's going to add it to our pip lock file for us. And let's go ahead and get back inside of our pip environment, and we can do pip show Django all-auth. And I need to type pip in front of that. And there we go. We see Django all-auth 0.44.0. Now there's a few things we need to do to actually make this work. All we did was say, hey, in this virtual environment, Django all-auth exists. What we need to do as well is we need to go into our settings.py, and where is our installed apps? In our installed apps, we need to add a couple things here. So for Django all-auth to work, first of all, we need Django contrib sites enabled. So Django contrib sites, and that just allows Django to be multi-site. Then we want to install all-auth, and it doesn't really matter. I usually put all of my third-party packages and my local packages or modules such as feed below the Django stuff. So we want to put all auth in there. We also want to add all auth.account. And just for good measure, because all auth also supports logging in with Facebook, GitHub, Twitter, etc., let's do all auth.social account. And then, somewhere near the bottom, let's go ahead and add a bunch of all auth settings. So first things first, there's a lot in here. We need site ID, and we only have one site, so we're going to use site ID 1 by default. Then there's going to be a login URL, and we just want to set that to be /login because that's pretty standard. Then there's going to be a login redirect URL, and that, once you log in, where is it supposed to take you? We really only have one view right now. That's our home page. So let's go back to our home page. Then there's account authentication, if I can spell any of that right, authentication method is equal to. And how do we want people to authenticate their accounts? We want to say, send them an email. Account confirm email on get is equal to true. And what this does is when you click that link in your email, will it automatically confirm, or do they need to press a button on your website to confirm? We're going to say they don't need to press a button, just on a GET request is good enough. Account email required is equal to true, because we want everyone to have an email account, because we're creating a service where you want to be able to email people, or at least reach out to people. Let's do account email verification is equal to optional. Do they have to verify their email? And so this can be optional, or this can be mandatory. I'm going to make this optional for now. Account login on email confirmation is equal to true. We're just going to power through a few of these. Account log out on get. Does that mean someone has to actually fill out a form? Like in their HTML, is it going to be wrapped in a form to sign out? Technically, this should be false. That would be the proper way to log out, but we're going to do the cheating way, and we're going to say, yeah, they can just simply click a link and it works. Account login on password reset is equal to true. And there's a few more, but before we get through all of these, let's go ahead and type in Django all auth docs into the all-knowing Google machine. And there's all sorts of settings in here. So we can go over to our configuration, and this is pretty much what I'm configuring right now. It's just a bunch of these. Not all of them, but a bunch of them. And so at any point in time, if you're ever like, oh, I don't remember what Caleb wrote about authenticated login redirects, you could actually just go straight to the docs and it'll tell you exactly what it's supposed to do. And what the options are. Is it true, false? Is it optional? Is it mandatory? Etc., etc. Account logout redirect is equal to, let's go back to the home page. So when you log out, where is it going to redirect the user to? I like this one. Account preserve username casing is equal to false. And so the username such as Kane should be the same as Kane all uppercase. And that's what we're saying here, that those are not two different usernames. Account session remember is equal to true. And what this does is if you set this to false, the login form is automatically going to have a button in there that says, remember me for 2 weeks or whatever. We don't really want that. We're just going to say, remember forever. Account sign up password enter twice is equal to true. We want people to enter their password twice just so that they don't accidentally lock themselves out of their account, because that's inconvenient, and frankly, the user is going to blame your website for that, even if they spelt it wrong. Account username min length is going to be, let's say 2. The shortest username has to be 2 characters. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, authentication backends is going to be, and we're going to write a tuple or a tuple in here, and we're going to add two in here, django.contrib.auth.backends.model_backend. And that was all uppercase. That should have been all lowercase. There we go. And the second one is allauth.account.authbackends.authentication backend. Let's go ahead and save that. And it says that we have 7 unapplied migrations. So let's go ahead and let's do python manage.py migrate. Cool, that applied all of them. Now, last but not least, even though all of this is set up properly, let's go over to our URLs in our TIL app. So our TIL, where our settings live, instead of going to settings, we're going to go to URLs, and we're going to add a new one in here. And we want to simply add URL blank include allauth.urls. And this isn't imported yet, so let's go ahead and import that. And that comes from Django conf URLs, where include comes from URL. And let's save that and see, and there is some sort of issue there. Yep. That's why we usually do trailing commas. Cool, 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 cool. Okay, so this is all up and operational. When we go back to our page here, we're going to see nothing happens. But what we can do now is we can go to /login. And that's actually not going to do anything either because I'm already logged in as the admin. Let's do new private window. And let's go to /login. And now we have a login page. And we can simply enter the email address and our password. So I'm going to enter in my email address, caleb@caleb.io, and my password. And I'm going to click sign in. And now I'm logged in. And if I wanted to, I could go to /logout, and it logs me out. Now at this point in time, we actually have no idea if we're logged in or logged out. That's totally fine. All we needed to do was set up user login and logout. If we wanted to, we could simply go to /signup, and now people can sign up with their email address. They can put a username and enter their password in twice and automatically sign up. So I'm going to close that for now. And that's really all there is to this particular lesson. Let's go ahead and add a global logout and login link. So it's going to be global. So we want that to be in our TIL templates base.html. This is our global file. And so what we can say here is we can check to see if someone is authenticated or not authenticated, as in, are they logged in or not? And we can simply do that with if request.user.is authenticated. And we can say else. And let's do this. You are logged in. I don't really mind that there's a typo in there. You are logged out. And let's just see what this does. So it says I'm logged in. If I open this up in new private window, it says I'm logged out. It says that right there. If I go to /login and log with my username and password, it now says I'm logged in. So now we have authentication. We're logged in, we're logged out. Cool, 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 cool. Now we need to add these links. And so all we need to do is say, instead of saying you are logged in, because that's not helpful, someone's going to know if they're logged in or not, we can add a link, href is equal to, it goes to some place, log out. Because the user's already logged in, they want a logout link. If they're logged out, they want a login link. So href is equal to some link we don't know yet, login. And let's make this ugly, because we'll make this prettier in a little bit. Let's just add that HR in there, that horizontal rule. Okay, it says I'm logged in because it's showing me the logout link. Let's go ahead and add that link because currently that's going nowhere. So we do this, we say URL account logout, and this is just coming from Django allauth. And we can do the same thing down here with account login. URL account login. And now it looks like it did nothing, but if I click log out, it logs me out. And if I click log in, it's going to ask me to log in. And I log back in. And I can log back out. So now we have a login, log out system, and our template actually allows the user to log in and log out whenever they want. All right, let's take a look at extending all auth templates. As in, when we're here and we go to, let's go back into the login page. Look, we have messages. We could style those if we wanted to. Anyways, let's say we don't want this menu to show up and we just want the sign in to show up. How do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, let's do this. Django all auth GitHub. And we can go into all auth, templates, account, and we have all these different links in here, or not links, but files. So like, let's take the login one, and that comes from, remember, this is important, pathing is important. So it comes from account/login. So let's say we want to overwrite that. Let's go to TIL templates. Let's create a new folder called account and a new file called login.html. And let's just say this is overwritten. Let's go back to our sign in page, and it says that it's overwritten. And so what we can do now is we can copy all of this code. Let's go down here, copy all of that code, throw that back in here, make sure that we are actually extending properly, and basically we just put it back. And if we wanted to, we could do this with every single file that Django all auth gives us. And sometimes there's a case for that, and sometimes there isn't. Now, that can be a little bit painful because there's a lot of templates in here, like password change, password reset done, password reset from key done, password set, you know, on and on and on. And we can do that over and over and over again. It's going to take you a couple hours, and it's going to be kind of painful. There's a better way to live your life. And so, do we have a base.html in here? In our templates. Templates, account, I don't think we do. No, we do. It's right there. Perfect. There is a better way to live life. Okay, look at this. So in our Django all auth account folder, there is a file called base.html. And this is getting into some fancy templating here, but what we can do is basically overwrite all of them all at once. So instead of doing one at a time, we can overwrite a bunch of them. It's still going to have the contents, but it's going to be able to extend from our base.html, which is going to be very, very important. And you can see that if account base.html, let's open up our base.html. Let's do this. This is our base.html file. And let's change it from, instead of extending from account/base.html, let's just extend from our base.html. And let's go see what this looks like. This is our base.html login. That worked. That worked for us. Now, the problem here is that it's using block content. And I said, we're going to call this block body. Now, we could change this to content and then change it over in our homepage if we wanted to. Or we could have two in one, or we could nest them if we wanted to. So let's go ahead and simply nest this, because that's probably going to be the easiest way. Block content, end block. And look at that, we have all the sign-in stuff. Now, what's nice about this in particular is that if we go back into our login, which is extending from base.html, we don't have a block head title. We don't have, what else do we have in here? Get providers. So it's block content. Can we close that? We can't close that one. Indenting is weird on this. Yeah, okay. So I guess we're gonna have to stick with that example. There's no head title. And in fact, you can see up here, the default title exists. It's falling back because there is no head title set in our base.html. We only have title. We called it title. They called it head title. So what we can do instead of doing all of this is we could go back and just overwrite their base file. So let's go to account and let's take their base file and let's just forward it to our base file. And so we could take all of this if we wanted to. Let's take the raw version of this. And let's create a new file called base.html. And okay, so this is a lot like our base.html. This is actually no good. What we want to do is we want to get rid of the extra stuff. So we don't need extra head, extra title. We don't need any of that stuff. Let's go down here. Let's get rid of extra body. We don't need that. They do actually have a block in here called body. Look at that. And so what we can do is block body. If there are messages, show messages. Menu, do we want to show that menu? No, let's not show that menu. Let's get rid of that. And let's maybe make this just a tad nicer looking, because that indenting is strangely bad for such a popular library or such a popular package. That indenting is just amazingly terrible. Okay, let's get rid of that stuff. And so we're just overwriting their base.html file. And what we want to say now is extend or extends our base.html file. Not the account/base.html, but our base. It's going to look for our base first, and then it's going to look for the account/base.html file. Let's go ahead and save this, and let's see what happens. Login is actually a bad example because we've overwritten that. Let's go to forgot password, and look, it keeps our base.html stuff in here. Let's say we want to sign up. It keeps our base.html stuff in there as well. So let's let's get rid of that because we don't require that anymore. And let's maybe add a link back to the home page on every page. And so let's just add a quick little link. href is equal to / that's just our home page. I'm going to call this home. And we don't need to use a URL here just because the home page is already the home page. It's going to be the same whether we use a / or whether we use a Django URL. So we have home, we have login. Let's go ahead and ditch this login one. Let's go login, delete, move to trash. And it looks pretty much the exact same. That's perfect. That's what we want. We want this to be working this way. And so at this point in time, we have now extended all auth templates. And again, there's really two ways we can do this. If I just go back here, we can either do it one by one, and in some cases you might have to. You might have to overwrite an entire one just because. Just because reasons. Your reason might be different from my reason, so I can't tell you an exact reason, but it is possible to do that. Or you can say just overwrite all of them by overwriting their base file. So I just took their base file. If there are messages, show some messages in here, and extend from our base. So what this chain of command now looks like is login is going to go to account/base, that's Django allauth, account/base.html. And instead of showing all of this stuff, we said, just show what we want to show and extend from our base.html, which is then going to inject everything in here. And just like that, we have the ability now to theme our page any way we please. All right, let's go ahead and add some tailwind so that our site actually looks a little bit nicer. And we're going to actually steal some component, well, not steal, but we're going to use some components that some other people have gratefully open sourced. So first things first, we need to go to our base.html, and in here we need to add some sort of CSS. And in order to do that, let's open up a new tab and go to Tailwind CSS. And let's go and get started. And installation. Is there a CDN in here? We don't want to do the whole front end stuff. We just want the CDN. And this is no way to live your life in production, by the way, because Tailwind is a very, very big CSS file. But while you're doing some local work, this is totally okay. Now let's go ahead and see what our page looks like now. Okay, that did a lot of resetting, a lot of resetting. So that's actually not a bad thing. We can now add anything we want to it. So let's go ahead and add some sort of navigation. Now I know for a fact that I want this particular navigation. And all I did was to find this to type into Google Tailwind components, and I found a navigation that I really, really like. And so this is our navigation in here. And what I want to do here is show the code. This is all the code. I'm going to copy all of that. And let's do this. Let's push everything to the bottom for now. And put that up top. And what else do we have in here? Do we have anything else? Oh, we have CSS that comes with it. Let's move that up into our head where it's supposed to be. And let's just say the component is from this particular link so that they are getting credit for it. And let's see what this looks like. Okay, not bad, not bad. We don't want all of these. And we want some sort of content area in here as well. So let's start looking through some of this. Logo, let's change that logo from logo to TIL, stands for Today I Learned. Dashboard, this link can go straight to the home. Perfect. What else do we need? We need login, logout links. So let's get rid of all these ones between the home and logout. Logout, logout, logout. And all I did was just delete a bunch of stuff there. So now we have logout, login, or not login, but home and logout. Let's add login, because we don't know if we're currently logged in or not. That's how people tell. They say they see a logout link, and if they see a logout link, they go, I'm logged in. And if they see a login link, they go, oh, I'm logged out. Okay, so we can do that pretty easily. With that logout link, what we can do is if request.user.isAuthenticated, and if, so if the user is authenticated, show a logout link. And where does that logout link go? We wrote this in a couple of lessons ago. Log out. Let's just go ahead and steal that. Put it right in there. Then we can say if the user is not logged in, otherwise they're logged out, we could take this whole thing, copy and paste, and instead of account log out, we want log in, and we want this to say login. Login. And this goes down to our login page. It looks like we did nothing just because we don't have a content area in here yet. Let's also change this icon, because when we log in and log out, currently the icons are the exact same. So do we have an icon in here somewhere? Yes, I, class, bx log out. Let's do log in. There we go, that just switched it. Let's do that again. Undo, and I'll refresh just over here on the left side. There we go. That worked pretty good. You could always just Google as well, box icons. Let's do this. Box icons CSS? Oh, there we go, box icons. And so we could use any icon that we want in here. That's pretty cool. These are nice icons too, I like these. Might use these in a future project of mine. Okay, so that's all good. We now need a content area. And so at this point, we might want to zip up some stuff here. So we've got flex, col, width, 56, yada, yada, yada. Let's try this. Div, my stuff here. Ah, there it is. Let's add some padding. Class P-16. There we go, that looks a little better. And then we can throw all of our content in there. So let's scroll back on down. Let's get rid of the stuff we're no longer using. We're using the login, logout links. We don't need that anymore. We don't need that HR anymore. We do need the body and content in there. And we can just move that up. There we go. So this doesn't look really great. Honestly, I'm not going to show you exactly how to style it. Just because that is a complete front-end course on its own. But what you can do is you can always just inspect and say, hey, I need to style these H1s differently. And you can use Tailwind H1s, or you can overwrite the template and add classes to it if you wanted to. So let's go ahead and log in. And I'm now logged in, and I can now go and log out if I wanted to. And so we simply added Tailwind with a nice little navigation on the left. Don't forget, at any point in time, you can always check out the source code. I have been making commits along the way, so you can see just the code that I changed in each individual lesson. All right, let's go ahead and make our posts look nice using Tailwind CSS. Now, I already found a particular component that I really want to use. And so what I'm going to do is just on my other monitor here, I'm just going to copy this link and go on down and paste. And this is what I want a post to look like. Now, here's the thing is we're not going to have all the details right away. We're going to have to go and add those in just a little bit. We don't know who wrote what. We don't know if there's a detail link. We don't have categories. We don't have titles either. It's literally just text. So how do we add this? Let's go ahead and just copy all of that code. And you can see the code in here. I simply copied all of it. And what I can do is go into my feed and where is every post being posted, or where is it being displayed? It's being displayed on our homepage. So let's go ahead, make some room for us to work here and just paste that in there. And let's say that this component is from that link. Now, this is going to change these 3 ugly posts to look all the same, but we can modify those. And this actually doesn't look too bad, does it? I like this quite a bit. So what we can do, first of all, is that date. Let's change that date. We know that every post has a date item on it, or a date attribute, date property. Okay. That works a little bit better. Let's say we didn't want it to say the full date, though. We could do pipe date, and let's do FJYGIA, and I'll show you where I got that in just a second. So where I got that weird FJYGIA is from php.net date. And let's go to the date manual. And I might be on the wrong page, but I found an example that works nonetheless. So here's the one that I used. And that's actually one that I tend to use on a lot of my projects. Mine is very similar. You can use MDY and it shows you like month, day, year. You can it'll show you examples of what all of these can do. So it's just the PHP date manual. Let's do date formats. Let's see what this does. Yeah, no, not quite. The first example was better. Let's just pretend I didn't show you that one. All right, we don't have a title, so let's go ahead and get rid of that title. Where are you? And we also don't have category. So I'm just going to comment out that category. So it doesn't say design in there anymore. We don't have a title in there as well. So let's go ahead and cut out that title. And our post is supposed to look something like this, post.text. And that actually made our posts a lot smaller than anticipated. So what we can do here is, let's see. The whole thing, let's just give this like a width. We can do this in Tailwind as well, but this particular module, Django 201, is not a Tailwind course. So we're focusing more on the Django side of things than we are the Tailwind side of things. But we still need things to look like. We still need things to look nice. So let's go ahead and save that. That looks a little bit better. Let's add some to-dos in here. The read more, we don't know where that's supposed to go yet. So before we finish up this module, we're going to look through basically all of our source code for a to-do. To-do, add a detail URL. And what else do we need in here? We need this user to be different. And so let's add another to-do in here. To-do, user needs a link to their bio and a photo and a thumbnail and a name. So needs quite a bit. So instead of like saying, hey, yeah, we're going to do this all in the next lesson, because that next lesson could probably be 30, 40, 50 minutes long. I don't actually know. Instead, we're going to create a little to-do, which is just saying, hey, future us, whenever we see this, just know that we need to take a look for this to-do, or we need to find a to-do, and we need to read what it's telling us to do. So it's a way of keeping track of your code. Now, if your to-do doesn't highlight like mine, that's okay. I am using an extension called to-do tree, called it's called To-Do Tree. It's by Grunt Fugly. So for now, honestly, this is working. This is working as well as we want it to work. All we really wanted to do was add a nice little component in here. Okay, let's go ahead and add profiles, because right now we don't have user profiles. And that's one of the things that we needed to add in the last lesson. We just don't have them. Let's go ahead and create them. And so all we have to do here is do python manage.py start app, and let's call this profiles. And we see a new folder in here. Let's go into our settings and activate that. So we go into our installed apps. I'm going to call it profiles, because that's what it's called, profiles. And then in our models.py, we can create a new profile model. So let's do class profile, and this is going to be a user profile. It takes models.model as its inheritance. User is going to be some sort of link back to the regular user object. Now, if that was a little bit confusing, let's close up a few of these things first. We have users. And with these users, maybe we want to use the first name and the last name, but you don't see a place to upload an image in here. And so we need to extend that. And so one way to do this in Django, and there's usually a few ways to do things in any framework, but one way is to simply create another model, such as the one called profile, and link the original user to this profile. And so that's what we're going to end up doing. And so we say the user is equal to models.one-to-one field. And this is going to take a Django user, which we'll import in just a second. On delete is equal to models.cascade. So when we delete that user, also delete this profile. And let's give this a related name of profile. In fact, actually, let's not give this a related name just yet. So what I'm going to do is comment this out. And we need to import that user. So let's do from django.contrib.auth.models. I can't ever remember this one. Import user. Let's see if Django complains about that. No complaints. Good, good, good. Let's go ahead and make migrations. Created a profile for us. Migrate. And let's register this in our admin. So let's take a look at what we've already done. We've done this with feed/admin. So let's just copy all that. Close that down and go into profiles admin. And let's just read through this one line at a time. We need the admin module from models. What do we have here? Models. There's no post model in here. It's not called post. It's called profile. And so instead of post admin, we're going to call it profile admin. And let's refresh in here, and we're going to see, wait for it, profiles. Now there is no profile yet, so what we can do is we can manually attach a profile here. So let's create a new profile here, and that user is going to be Caleb, and that user is going to link to this particular user. And so there's always going to be a one-to-one relationship here. So every time there's a user, there should be a profile, and every time there's a profile, there should be a user. Oh, look at that. Profile object doesn't have a proper name. Let's go ahead and add that proper name. Glad that showed up. Def __ string __ self return self.user.username. And just wait for that to load. And there we go. So there's actually no point to having this at this point in time, but we are going to extend the user by adding a profile, which can then have a thumbnail or some sort of image. Let's go ahead and re-enable that related name profile, and let's see if this makes another migration. Doesn't ever hurt to check to see if you need to make a new migration. So it did. Let's go ahead and migrate that, and we are good to go. Now, one last thing we want to do here is we want to add this thing called a signal. And so the idea here is every time we create a new user, also create a new profile automatically. And what a signal does, it's a lot like a webhook or a hook in React. Or if you come from the land of JavaScript, it's a lot like a callback. So when a user is created, we can take a particular action. And so that is called a signal in Django. So let's do def create user profile. We're going to ask for the sender, or not ask, but receive, I guess, the sender, the instance created, and keyword args. And if you're ever wondering more about signals, because this course is not going to go too deep into signals, the Django docs are a great place to start. And so let's add a doc string in here. Create a new profile object when a Django user is created. Simple as that. Let's go ahead and say if created is true, profile.objects.create user, that's up here, so profile.user is equal to the new user instance. And in order for this to work, we need to register this as a receiver to receive that signal, post save, and that sender is going to be user. And so what we're saying here is there's a signal out there somewhere. Think of it like a signal out in space. And we have a giant satellite dish, and we're trying to receive signals. Then we're looking for a particular type of signal. We're looking for a post save. So once the user is saved, or once an object is saved, rather, we're saying, check to see what kind of data is coming in. So if that data is a user, and it was just saved, execute this. And so we need to now import receiver and post save. We don't need to import user because we already have user. So we need to import receiver and save, or post save rather. So from django.db.models.signals, import post save. Nope. Post save. There we go. And from Django, I'm really stretching my memory here. From Django.dispatch, import receiver? Django didn't complain. Cool. So now we can go ahead and create a new user, and ideally it would create a new profile as well. So let's go back into our admin. Let's create a new user. Test. Put a password in there. And let's just save. Let's go into profiles. There it is. It automatically created it for us. So it automatically creates a profile every single time we create a new user. And that just keeps that one-to-one relationship existent. So as a quick recap, what we did was we said, hey, every user needs to have a profile attached to it. We haven't added anything in particular yet except that one-to-one field that really connects that user to that profile. Then we said every profile should be called self.user.username, whatever that username is. So it's saying self.user, go over to that user, that Django user. We know that every Django user has a username, and use that as a representation for its name, its object name. Then we said every time a user is saved, execute this function, create user profile. It's going to accept the sender, our sender here. Our instance is going to be the user instance. So if I created a new user called test, it's going to send that test user as instance. Check to see if that object was created, and then a bunch of keyword arguments that we don't need to worry about. If a new user was created after post save, then we can say profile.objects.create user is equal to that instance. And that just creates a new profile for us every time a new user is generated. And we learned about receivers and signals, and how a signal is like a radio frequency out in space, and how a receiver is like your satellite dish. All right, let's go ahead and install a thumbnailing library. So let's just close this down from our last lesson. And we need to do a few things to install this. So first of all, we need to find a library to work with. So what I'm going to do is just open up my browser and type in Django thumbnailing package. And we can go to djangopackages.org and look through a bunch of them. There's Django thumbnails, Django thumbnail maker. We're going to use Sorrel thumbnail because I'm familiar with this one. I've used it in Django 101. If you took Django 101, you used it as well. So we know that it works. And we need to go down into installation. Get the code. This is what we do. Pip install Sorrel thumbnail, or because we're using pipenv, we can do it a slightly different way. We can get out of our pipenv and we can do pipenv install Sorrel thumbnail. And we just give that a quick second to do its thing. Alrighty, that is done, so we can do pipenv shell and do pip show Sorrel thumbnail. And there it is. Now, if you're not using pipenv, you can always just do pip install Sorrel thumbnail. You can actually do that inside of a pipenv as well. It just won't add it to your pip file or your pip file.lock. Now, how do we install this thing? We add sorrel.thumbnail, not just Sorrel, which we usually do with the Django package, just the name of the package. We're going to do the name of the package and then a folder in there, and that's how we're going to enable this. So let's go back over to VS Code, and let's open up settings.py, and just somewhere in here, toss in sorrel.thumbnail, and we should see that Django restarts. We have an unapplied migration. Let's go ahead and run that migration. Python manage.py migrate. And this just applied thumbnail 0001 initial, and that's from sorrel.thumbnail. Now, how do we actually use this? Model usage, this is what we want. We want from sorrel.thumbnail import image field, and then use image is equal to image field, and then upload to wherever we want it to upload to. And that's going to be inside of our media folder. So it could create a subfolder inside of our media folder called whatever. I think we're going to skip this, and we're just going to use this part here. So let's go ahead and open up our profiles, models, and we want to add this right in here. And then we can write this right there. Image is equal to image field. That's coming from sorrel.thumbnail and upload to wherever. Let's call this profile. As I said, maybe we'll skip it, but maybe let's not, so we can see what it's actually doing and where it's going. And now you can see that Django is complaining. Django actually says that we cannot use the image field because pillow is not installed. So we have to go and install pillow. So let's get out of pipenv again. Pipenv install pillow with a capital P. All right, let's go back into our pipenv. And let's say pip show pillow. And this is just going to show us that it was in fact installed. We don't have to verify every single time. I like to verify just to make sure. Just because I have multiple versions of Python and lots of weird Python pathing on my computer, I just want to make sure that pillow is actually installed properly. Now, if we go over to this terminal and we simply restart Django, we won't see any more errors. We won't see any more complaints. So this is good news. Now, at this point, we can go and edit our user profile. So let's go into our admin and let's go to profiles. And it says, oh no, no such column. Well, what we did was we ran a migration for Sorrel thumbnail, but we didn't make a migration and then run that migration for our new field on our profile. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do python manage.py make migrations. And because we're saying that it cannot be null or blank, we have to provide a one-off. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you that I'm going to type 1 to provide a one-off default. And because we don't have an image, I'm just going to type the number 1. And that's good enough for what we have now. Let's go ahead and make those migrations and then run those migrations. And let's head back over to our browser, refresh, and we can see that this works. Cool, 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 cool. So this image says currently 1. If I click this, first of all, it goes to localhost port 8000/1. Not in a media folder. We haven't set that up yet. And the image is just what we typed. So even if we did have our media folder set up, which we don't, this still isn't going to show an image. There is no image called just 1. It's usually like 1.jpg, 1.png, 1.whatever. And that just isn't here. And so that's what that 1 did. What we can do instead is we can say browse, and we could select like animated.jpg, and save and continue editing, and watch this. This goes into profiles, animated. Now this still isn't going to be found, and that's normal. Notice it did create a folder called profiles, and then it uploaded the image for us. So that's all we're going to do for this particular lesson. Coming up, we are going to be working on actually getting this to work by adding our media URLs. Okay, so we don't have our media URL set up yet. We need to do that. The reason we do that is because basically it tells Django where to upload all of our files to. Now, if we look at this in our left-hand column here, there's already a folder called profiles. And so it just added animated.jpg to it. That's me as an animated character. My friend Steve made that for me. So we don't want that. We want all of these images to actually go into its own folder called media. So first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete this because it doesn't belong there. And no harm done if you delete it, because we currently don't have working image URLs anyways. So first things first, let's close this down and let's go into our settings.py. And that's somewhere, I don't know, I guess near the top. Let's just do this. We need a media root. Media root is equal to something. os.path.join. And then the base dir, that's coming from line 16 just above us. And a folder called media. And then we're going to say that media URL, how that should be served, is going to be /media with a slash at the end. Now that's not quite enough to get us there. We also need to go into our Django URLs, and we need to, first of all, include our settings because we're going to be using that media URL. So we do from Django.conf import settings. And we're going to need to import one more in here. And this is going to come from conf.urls.static, I believe. Let's just copy that over so I don't have to type it all again. Static. And we want to include static. Now again, that's still not enough. All we did was import some stuff. We actually need to add it to our URL patterns. So what we can say here is URL patterns plus static, and then we want that settings.media URL. And the document root is going to be settings.media root. And what this is going to do is say, hey, for your static URLs, while you're running on localhost, not in production, because you don't want to serve your media files through Django in production, that's not safe. But for what we're doing here, that's totally okay. We're going to say, connect that media URL with that media root. And let's go back and take a look at that. That media URL /media, so yourwebsite.com/media, with that media root, that folder that we're going to end up creating. So let's go ahead and save that. And let's go back to Firefox, and we can close that one down. Let's just refresh this page. Looks like nothing changed, but if I re-upload animated, save and continue editing, it looks again like nothing changed, but this URL now changed. This URL, A, shows up, and B says localhost port 8000/media/profile/animated. It has that media in there, and that profiles is coming from, if we go to profiles models, it's coming from right there. And so now we can actually see on the left-hand side in our folders, we have media, and then profiles, and then animated.jpg. Now, if we do a git status, this git status is going to show us that we can add media to our repository, and we don't want that. So we want to open up our git ignore, and I usually just toss this at the bottom somewhere. I just type media / and then if we do another git status here, we can see that media doesn't show up. So we do git add, git commit, and then you can do your regular git commit. And that simply is just not going to commit all of your images to your repository, because if you have 20, 30, 40, 50 people working on a repository and they're all adding their own test images, that repo is going to get really, really big, and you're going to download their files every time you do a git pull, and it's not a place you want to be living in. So that's really all there is to that. Let's do a quick little recap though. To add our media URL, we add a media root and a media URL. Then we go to our urls.py, we import static, we import settings, and then we say URL patterns plus static. And then we connect that media URL with a document root, which is going to point to media root. All right, at this point in time, we now have feed, media, profiles, templates. We have all sorts of stuff in here. Let's go ahead and open up our feed. And what we want to do is we want to give a post an author, because currently we don't actually know who's posting anything. It could be completely anonymous at this point, and maybe we don't want that. Maybe we want people to be able to follow each other, like on Twitter, Instagram, anything like that. And so what we need here is a foreign key to an author. And so we can do the author is equal to models.foreign key. And this is going to accept the Django user, which we're going to have to import in just a second. On delete is equal to models.cascade, which means when we delete this user, also delete their posts. And then if we go back up to the top, we could do from django.contrib.auth.models import user. I think that's right. I have a hard time remembering this one as well, but I'm pretty sure it's django.contrib.auth.models. I saved it and Django restarted and there weren't any problems. So presumably that's all we needed to do. So let's go ahead and make migrations. And the reason we make migrations is because we added an author field to our post. We added any field to our model. We have to make migrations. Now this is going to say, do I want to quit and give a default? So all posts will default to a particular user, or do I want to say, provide a one-off default now, and maybe we manually change it down the road. I'm going to say, let's provide one now, and we can manually change it down the road. And I'm just going to say that every post is coming from user ID number 1. And we can deal with the repercussions of that in just a moment. So let's go ahead and close that down. And let's look at our posts. Oh, no such column. That actually makes a lot of sense because we made that migration, but we didn't actually migrate it yet. There we go. Let's see, our first post was author Caleb. And so when I typed in 1, all that did was find the first user. Where are my users? So I have these users in here. And at the very top, you can see user ID 1 in that URL. And that's where I got that 1 from. If we wanted all the users to be our test user, or all the posts to be authored by our test user rather, we would say number 2. And so now when we add a post, we can select an author. It's going to be a user from our app, and we can give it some text. And currently, all of our posts are from me. All right, let's go ahead and add our author image and name to each post. So if we go back to our application here on our homepage and refresh, we haven't done anything with the template. Everything is just the default stuff that we find in here. So let's go ahead and change this image, and let's change that name as well. So let's go ahead and open up our homepage. And in here, because we want to use our thumbnailing, our thumbnailing library or thumbnailing package, we need to load that into this template. And that just tells Django, hey, we're going to be using a package called thumbnail, or actually rather, load a file called thumbnail. And it allows us to use all the functions inside of a file or module called thumbnail. And so we can do that. That's, where are we here? Where are we here? We need to replace this image and that name. Now we have an author, so we can replace that name right away. Every post has an author, and every author has a username. And so let's make that connection right away. Every post has an author. That author is a user object. And when we are in our admin and we're looking at users, every user has a username right there. So let's go ahead and okay, look at that. Every post is now made by me. So that's right. That is actually correct. We'll make posts later with different users just to demonstrate that. Let's go ahead and change that image. Now that image is going to be a little bit trickier because we're using a third-party package. So what we could do is go back to that third-party package. And how do we use this in our template? We load thumbnail. That's where I got this from. And then the simple usage is right here. And we use a template tag called thumbnail. We give it the URL or the object of the image size, what kind of cropping we want, and then we set it as a variable name. And then inside of our image, we can set that image URL, that image width, and that image height. I think I said set that image URL height and width. We actually just need to get it. And so that's what this thumbnail is going to do. And then we say end thumbnail just so that we can stop using this IM variable in our template. So in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to copy this and I'm going to modify it. Now, where do I get that image from? Well, I get that image from our post author. And if we go into our profiles here, we're going to see that every author has a one-to-one field, or every user has a one-to-one field, and that user has an image. And so what we can do here is, instead of saying post author username, we can say post.author.profile. I believe that's what we called it. That's a related name here, profile. .image, and that connects our username, our regular user rather, to our profile using the related name called profile, and then gives us access to everything else inside of this model here, including image. And do we want to crop this to be 100 by 100? Width 373, so let's do the same thing here, 373 by 373. Centering is fine. And let's just indent that. And now we need to change that URL so that source, that image source, is not going to be from Unsplash anymore. That image source is going to be im.url. And I got that from right here, im.url. Let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what happens. Do I have a typo? Maybe, maybe not. Aha, look, there I am. That's me, animated me. Now let's go ahead and add one more post in here from someone else so that we know it's not just always me in there. Let's go ahead and create a new post. Nope. Yeah, let's add a post. That's what we want. This is from a test user. Author is going to be test. Save. And let's go into our profiles. And let's edit our test user because that image is going to be 1, currently not found, not useful. Let's change this to that photo of me. Save. There we go. So it is in fact working. Now this isn't linking to a profile view. This isn't linking to a read more view or a dedicated view. We're going to get started on those pretty soon. But for now, we just need to get this image and that name up and running. All right, let's go ahead and add a post detail view and a link. We have these to-dos. Actually, this one could be cleaned up from that last video. Oh no, that's still pretty much correct. We still need to actually have that URL in there. So add URL below. So let's just close this down and let's maybe open up. Let's go to feed URLs, and we already have a homepage URL in here. Let's go ahead and set a new URL. And so what we can do is pretty much copy this over. Well, we didn't have to copy that over. Let's not copy that over. Path. I'm going to say int, and that's going to be a PK. I'll describe what these are in just a second with a slash. But this is going to be basically our URL. So our website.com / and then a post. Views.post detail view. as view. We haven't created this yet, but we will. And we're going to give this a name of detail. So detail view. Now post detail view doesn't exist. We need to make that exist. And where's that coming from? Our views. And there's actually a syntax error right there. There we go. That's what we should be seeing. We should see module feed.views has no attribute post detail view. Let's go ahead and add that. So we can do class post detail view, and this is going to be a detail view. So we need to go and import that at the very top, detail view. That comes from our generic Django views. Let's go ahead and say HTTP method names is equal to a list, and only get is available. That might be the default, but I like setting that anyways. The template name is going to be feed/detail.html. That's where this is going to be living. And we say feed because that comes from over here. We're namespacing this. So if we had 20 other apps, maybe we had feed and feeds, plural. It would be important to namespace those. So if we had feed/detail and feeds/detail, we could say feed or feeds/detail. And that just sort of namespaces our templates for us, because Django is going to look all over the place for a template, and you never know which one it's going to find first. Actually, that's not true. You probably will know which one it'll find first when it shows the wrong one. And you just don't want to run into that kind of confusion. The model is going to be a post model. And the context object name, by default, I believe is usually object, but I like to change that to be the name of my model. So it's going to be post. So in the template, I can just write post. Nope, post. Now let's go back to our homepage and let's add a link to this detail URL here. So that link, where is that going to be coming from? So we say, open up our syntax, URL, feed, detail, and then we give it an ID. So that post.id. And let's quickly go over what I just did there. So for every post in posts, if I go into models, we know that there is an ID. We can see that ID if we go into our migrations initial. Every model has an ID. Every model has an ID by default. And so that's where we're getting that ID from. Occasionally, you will see, instead of ID, you will see the letters PK, primary key. In Django, they're the same thing. So feed is our app, and that's coming from our namespace URLs. And then detail is what we just wrote in our URLs. So this is the detail part. This is the feed part. Detail, feed. Let's go ahead and save that. And when we refresh our page, we should see that this now goes to a URL. This will go to /4, post number 4. And that's all there is to this. We just have to add our template to this. And so we actually have this link working now. If I go back and click the one prior to this, this will go to 3. And go back, go to the one prior to that, it'll go to 2. All right, let's go ahead and add a detail view to each post. So we said the template name has to be feed/detail.html. So let's go ahead and add detail.html into our templates here. So feed, templates, feed. Let's add a new file in here called detail.html. And let's just do this. Test. Let's just make sure that this works before we get too far into this. And it works. So now we know that we want to extend from our base.html file so that we have all of our goodies in there. In that base.html file, we have body and a title block. So we want that title block in here. Let's go ahead and copy that and change that title to be, let's not do anything crazy yet. Let's just do a custom title just to make sure that that works. We can also add block, body, more stuff in here. And it's not extend, it is extends. If you're yelling at your screen saying, Caleb, you did it wrong. Okay, there we go. And the title says a custom title. Okay, let's go ahead and change that custom title to be our entire post. Post.text. By post.author.username. And this is going to be a fairly long title. If your post is like 240 characters, this is going to be a super long title. But this says, this is a second post by Caleb. Cool, 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 cool. That's the one we're looking at. If we go back, this is from a test user by test. More stuff in here doesn't show anything, but what we could do is we could say post.text, and it shows our little message. And so it's now moving, this is a second post, this is a second post, from our list view to our detail view. And if you're wondering where I got that from, in our post detail view, I have model is equal to post, and the context object name is equal to post. And that's why we're able to use post in here, post.text. It's not object.text, which is what it would be by default. It's post.text. Now let's go ahead and make this look a little bit nicer. So I already have a component lined up, one that I would like to use. That's this one here. What I can do is just simply copy that code, and we're going to paste that code in here. And we need a date. And that's going to be post.date. We're not using categories, we're not using titles, and we just want text in here. So let's go ahead, change this to be our post.text. Let's take a look at what this looks like so far. Ooh, one too many curly braces. There we go. Read more, we don't need that in there. Read more, get rid of that. And basically what we're doing here is, at this point, we're taking everything in here from our home page, and we're just going to copy it over. And in fact, we can actually do that whole thing. So instead of going the long way and doing it all manually, what we can do is come in here, paste it from our home page, and it says invalid block tag on line 22 thumbnail. That's because we didn't load that in. We have to load in thumbnail. So load thumbnail. Aha! And that's looking pretty good. Now we have this issue where we have a read more link, and we're already on the detail view, so this is just going to link to itself, so that's no good. How do we get rid of that? Well, what we can do is we can move this into its own template include and give it a custom variable to say should something show up or should something not show up. And in our next lesson, we are going to be talking about the include template tag. Okay, let's go ahead and add an include tag. So what I'm saying here is, I'll just move this up to a place where I can write include. And the idea here is that we can write similar code or the same code more than once or rather just once in one place, and include it in more than one place. And so we have this code here in our detail view, and it is identical to what's in our home page here, the exact same code. And so what we can do here is we can basically cut that code, and we can go into a place that it's going to look for templates, and it's going to look for templates in TIL templates. Let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to give it a folder called includes first, includes, and I'm going to call it post.html. And I'm simply going to paste all of this in here. And on our homepage, instead of writing all of that stuff, what we can write instead is includes, that's the folder I put it in, post.html with some context. So that post is going to be a post. And so for every post on the right here, that's this one, we're also going to throw it into this post.html with the name of post, which is just going to allow us to write this post date, post text, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's see if I have any errors on here on the home page. Let's go to the home page. Oh, look at that, I didn't load thumbnail. So on our home page we have thumbnail. That's actually not needed because it's not used in this file. If we go into our post.html, we can actually just copy and paste that in there, or cut and paste that in there, and this is going to work for us. And the reason for that is because this thumbnail is actually being used in this file. Homepage, it's not being used in that file. So let's go ahead, and by the way, this was inside the for loop. On our detail view, let's go ahead and in our body, just paste that in there as well. We're going to say includes slash post.html with post is equal to post. And we don't need that thumbnail because thumbnail is not being used in this file anymore. It's only being used in post.html. So let's save all of that and refresh. And let's go to here. And it looks like it's filtering out, which is pretty close. That is what we want. Now, what happens if we don't want this read more in here? We're already on the detail view. We don't need to link back to this detail view. Let's go ahead and add a new context variable here. Show detail link is equal to true. And I'm just going to copy that name. And in my post.html, I'm going to put a read more in here. So if, not a read more, I was reading read more and trying to do too many things at once there. No detail view. And I don't mind that there's a typo in there. I'll fix that in just a bit. And so what we're saying here is when you include post.html, also put in post and show detail link inside of this file. And so if show detail link exists and it is in fact true, we can show that read more link. Otherwise, it's going to say no detail view. On our detail view, there is no detail view, and that's because we didn't put that in there. This is our detail view. This is our home page. However, if we go to our home page, that link still shows up. And that's exactly what we want. Now, we don't need that no detail view text in there, so let's click this. And that moves everything over. So maybe we do actually want a little something in there. Let's just add a span and NBSP just to force that text over there. And that's just because we're using flex and it's justify between, so we need at least 2 items in here. Either the read more item or the empty span plus a div for all of this. Now what's nice about this is when we do this, this include, when we write an include, we don't have to go through multiple files and change this URL later. We can just go through the post.html file, change it once, and it's going to change it for us in multiple places. So currently this link goes absolutely nowhere. And on the home page, this link also goes nowhere. But once we change that, because they're both pointing to the same file, detail is including post.html and homepage is including post.html, we only have to change the content or the URLs or the structure on post.html. Let's go ahead and create a new create view for creating posts, because right now we can only create posts through the admin. So this stuff in here, linking to a profile view, we'll come back to that in a little bit. That's why we have a to-do written in here. So let's close up all this stuff from our last lesson. And when we're creating a new view, what we want to do is go to our URLs, and we just want to write something new in here. So let's write, well, first of all, let's give a comma at the end there. Path, new with a slash. Let's go and add views.create new post.as view. And the name is going to be, I guess, new post. Now, this doesn't exist. And Django is complaining about that. So we need to go and create a new create new post view inside of our views file. Class, create new post. We don't know what kind of model this is going to be just yet. We need to create something. We need to, it's literally right in the name there. We need to create the post. So we're going to use this thing called a create view. And where that comes in from is from Django.views.generic.edit import create view. And that's part of our CRUD operations. So now this new create new post view needs to have a model, and it's going to create a new post. We're going to give it a template name, and this is going to be feed/create.html, which, by the way, if you don't know what comes on a create view, you can always go to ccbv.co.uk, and this will show you classy class-based views for Django. And that'll literally just show you anything you want to see. You want to see what a create view has, all the methods and properties on it. You can see all of them there. And the fields we want to add in here Well, let's open up our post models. Nope, it goes to feed models. And the only thing we want to add is text. We want the author to be added automatically so that I can't create a post on behalf of you. So let's go ahead and say the only field in there is going to be text. And this is going to be a list. Now we need to create this create.html file. And so we said it's going to be in the feed file in our template. So new file, template is going to be create.html. And let's go ahead and extend our base.html file. And let's give it a block of title. Create a new post. And let's give it a block of body. And in here we can say form.asp. And that's going to put all of our form items in paragraph tags. Now that's nice and everything, but there's no link here to actually go create one. So let's create a new link in here. So let's open up our home page. Nope, let's open up our base.html. And it's already folded up. So let's say if the user is authenticated, they can log out. They can also create a new post. So let's copy this. And we're going to say new post. Now, where does that link come from? That link comes from feed new post. So we need to add that in there. So we type feed : new post. And we're probably going to want to change that icon, but for now, let's just see if this works. New post goes to new. We have text in there. This is working. Now, this is not actually going to create a new post at this time. So if you're going to test this out and it doesn't work, that's normal. That's expected. We have a few more things we need to do here. That new post, though, let's go ahead and change that icon. And so where is that coming from? That's coming from box icons. So let's do this. Box icons. Google is our best friend. And search plus, maybe? Let's add layer plus. And so we click on that and it says name is layer plus. Nope, that's a web component. Oh, that's straight HTML. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that we could do that. As a font, we want BXBXS layer plus. That looks a little bit different from what I have. Doesn't it? Where are we? Where are we? Where are we? BX log out. We want layer plus. Bam. There we go. Now we can go to our new post view. Now we have a problem with this. The problem is anybody can come here and essentially try to create a new post. Now it's not hooked up, so it's not going to work, but anybody can come in. So let's copy this and let's open up a new incognito or private browsing window. And it works for me while I am not logged in. And so we need to force the user to be logged in. We can do that quite easily. I'm going to show you how to do that in the next lesson. All right, let's take a look at how we can force the user to be logged in, because right now a user doesn't need to be logged in order to attempt to create a post, and we don't want that. We want them to always be logged in. And so let's go ahead and open up our editor and close everything down. And I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this. So we go into our views, and we're going to import this thing called a mixin. So from Django.contrib .auth .mixins. Now we'll find out if this is wrong. Django will complain quite loudly if this is wrong. We do a login required mixin. Let's see if that's right. Let's just save that and see what Django says. Yeah, okay, that must be right. So that login required mixin, we can now put on our create view and inherit two classes at once. And so what this is going to do is say, hey, if that user is not logged in, kick him out. Otherwise, if that user is logged in, perform your regular create view tasks. And so I'm currently logged in here. This is going to work. And when I open up private browsing, I'm not logged in, so it didn't work for me. It kicked me out. It brought me to the login page and said next is going to be the new URL. So now I can log in here. And then it brings me to the new post page. Okay, let's work with our form view a little bit here. So in our form view, not our view, maybe let's work with our template first. That's going to be a little bit funner, I think. So in our template, we have this form in here. And while that's good, and it seems like it's doing what we want it to do, if I right click and inspect, you're going to see that it's just a paragraph. There's a div, a paragraph, a label, and an input. And I mean, while that is okay, we don't have a form. So how do we submit this? How do we submit this? This just doesn't work. I can hit enter as many times as I like, and this is just not going to work. So we need to wrap this in a form. So let's do exactly that. Let's do form method is equal to post. Action is going to be its own page. So whatever page, whatever URL this is coming from, we simply want it to post to itself. Then we need some sort of submit button. So let's go ahead and add a div in here. And so I want to add a nice button, and I already have a component lined up for this. It's this nice one. I want this send button. I want that nice one in there. Let's go ahead and not copy all the code. Let's just copy the send. That's that first one there. And I just pasted that in there. And let's see what that looks like at first. Okay, send. Not bad, not bad. Why is that padding off a little bit there? That button is acting weird. Oh, it's got margin all the way around it. Let's say margin X is going to be 0, margin Y is going to be 3. And that sort of lines it up a little bit better, I guess. We can always make this look better, a lot easier. So instead of saying send, let's say create post. And this button, its type is going to be submit. Now, when you submit a form in Django, you're going to see a CSRF verification failed, request aborted. And so whenever you see that, what you need in here is a CSRF token, CSRF underscore token. So now when we go ahead and refresh and test this out, at least we're getting a different error at this point, saying not null, constraint failed, post author ID needs to be filled. And that's because if we go to feed models, our author is not being set inside of our form. And so if we go back to our create view, we said the fields is just text, not the author. If we add author, this might look a little bit different. We can now select who the post is from, which is not what you want. When you're on Twitter, you don't want to be able to select from 340 million other users or however many users they want. That'd be a really long list. Plus, you don't want to be able to post on behalf of someone else. You want it to be a little more secure than that. So we don't put that in there. But it's complaining that it's not in there. So what we need to do here is we need to say def form valid when this form is valid. It takes self and the form itself. And at the very end, regardless of what we do, we need to return super.form valid with that form. And in here, let's go ahead and grab that form. Let's just call it object though. So form.save and commit is going to be false, which means we're simply just not going to save this yet. We're just going to grab the form and all the details in it, but we're not going to save it yet. Then we can do object is equal to, or object author is equal to request.user. We don't have request, so we're going to need to add that in just a second. And then we can do obj.save. Now, where does request come from? If you try this out, you're going to get an error. So we need to throw this into dispatch. So we do def dispatch self request args and kwargs, return super dot dispatch request args and kwargs. And you notice how we have request in here? Well, this is a class, so we can do self.request is equal to the request, and down here we can access it with self.request. And dispatch will always be run before functions like form valid. Let's see what kind of errors we have here. Right there, should not have a colon, and that seems to work. Okay, one more thing we need to do is on a create view, we need a success URL. So what happens when the form is successfully submitted? We can say the success URL is going to be just our homepage. Or we could reverse it to be our homepage using Django, reversing URLs, and basically say always go back to our index page. But our index page is always going to be hard-coded to be the same. In this particular case, it's always going to be the same. Our homepage is always going to be just a slash. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Test post number 1, create post. And there it is, test post number 1. And I can go in here, test post number 1. That is working for me. We are now able to create new posts. All right, let's add a Tailwind modal so that we can start ajaxing new posts onto the page. Now, I already have one picked out, and I just got it from tailwindcomponents.com. They have a lot of great components on here. And this is the modal that I want to use. And a modal is just a little dialogue pop-up box in front of all of your other content that says, hey, do you agree with cookies? Or, hey, do you want to confirm or deny doing this thing? And so I'm literally just going to copy this code, and I'm going to close down these files and go to base.html. And in my base.html, at the very bottom, I am just going to paste all that code in here. And I don't even know what that code looks like yet, so maybe it's too dark. So we do actually want that background to be a little bit transparent here. And so in the realm of Tailwind, we can do that. So we've got BG Gray 800. We can also do BG Opacity 90. And that makes it a little more see-through. What if we wanted to do like, could we do 75? Yeah, we could do 75. Let's stick with 75. This looks pretty good. We're not going to have a modal title, are we? Yeah, maybe we will. New post. No, not page, new post. And the text that's going to be in here is going to be some sort of form. So we're going to put a to-do in here. To-do. Add the Ajax form. And we can keep the close buttons in there. Let's refresh this. New post. To-do is going to be in there. Let's change that from agree to create post. And in fact, let's go to our create view and let's grab this button because I really like that button. And let's put it beside it. Let's see what we need to change here. So I just copied and pasted that. Cool, that actually worked out pretty good. Let's go ahead, fix that indenting, delete that one, and let's delete the close one. Because we have an X up here, we don't need that close. So there we go, create post and a close. Let's create post. Can we do something a little bit smaller in here? Can we do text SM? Yep, that makes it a little bit smaller. Padding Y is going to be 1, padding X is going to be 3, so we're just going to make this a smaller looking button. There we go, create post. And maybe let's add a margin to the top here. And again, this is just regular Tailwind, so if you're not sure what any of these do, you can just read through them, which is really nice. Tailwind is a utility-first library, and the documentation is actually quite good. And so we can do margin top, and let's do margin top of, see if 4 does anything. There we go, little margin top there. Create post. Now it's not going to do anything, and I think what I would like us to do is set this up for success in the next couple of lessons. So first of all, JS modal is what I'm going to call this. And I also want this to be hidden by default. And that button, that submit button that we want to work with here, let's change that from submit to button because we're going to use JavaScript for this. This is going to be called JS submit. And nothing shows up, it's completely hidden. We have one more thing to do in here. If a user is not logged in, this component should not show up. So we can say if request.user.isAnonymous. We can grab all of this code, outdent, and if, and it still looks like nothing happened, but the idea here is that this modal should not show up. In fact, let's do a little demonstration here. Where did I put hidden? Hidden, let's call it hidden2, that's not a class name. And that's not showing up, and this is why we test things, because I said if request.user is anonymous, we could say if request.user is authenticated. What I originally was going to do is say if not anonymous, but we could do the same thing, just sort of the opposite. We could say if request.user.is authenticated, then show it. There it is. And let's just hide it. Done. And that's all we're going to do for this lesson. We just wanted to add a nice Tailwind modal so that we could start adding stuff to it a little bit down the road. Okay, now before we continue, we need to add static files and folders to our application. So let's go ahead and close this. And we're going to want to open up our settings.py. So somewhere in here, I'm just going to throw this at the bottom. We want static files. Let's do this all uppercase. Static files directories is equal to a list, and we're going to say os.path.join our project directory, which we have set up in a much earlier lesson. And we're going to call it front end. Then we're going to add a static root, not status, but a static root is equal to os.path.join, and then we want to join that base directory with static. And lastly, we want our static URL, and let's put that on a new line. Our static URL is going to be /static, which looks a lot like our media URL. This is just where our static assets are going to be built. Now, a static asset is like your own JS file or your own CSS file inside of your own application. We didn't cover this in Django 101. Now let's go ahead and create a new file in here. And we're going to create a bunch of folders first. So the first folder is going to be front end, and that matches what we wrote on line 156. And then a subfolder called JS, and then a file called main.js. And we're simply going to say console.log hello world with a heart. And then in our base.html, what we can do is at the very top, we can say load static. And at the very, very bottom, where we want to load our static JavaScript, we could simply say script src is equal to static js/main.js. And let's make sure that that is a string. Now let's go into our page here and go into console. So I just went right click, inspect element, console, refresh, and nothing happens. So what we want to do at this point in time is we want to type python manage.py collect static and watch what it does on the left here. It's going to create a static folder for us. There it is, our static folder. And so our static folder, whenever we run this static in here, and what we need to do is close that. Whenever we run this static template tag, this function, it's going to then look for this folder, this file, and that's going to go in here, js, main.js. And so basically it just copied over our code from our front end folder into a static folder. So let's go ahead and refresh, and it says hello world, heart sign, less than 3. Now moving forward, can we do anything we want in the front end? Hello, this is front end. In fact, we can. And so the whole reason we collect static is because ideally we don't really want all of our front-end code to be executed. We want it to run from our static folder. And so this is how we do that. We use that collect static command to collect all of our static files so that when we're in production, Django knows where to find things. We can say, hey, engine X, instead of using Django, we can say, hey, engine X, look for all of our admin files in static/admin or something along those lines. So moving forward, we can put all of our code in frontend/js/main.js. And when you go to deploy your application at some point in the future, whenever you're ready, you just make sure you type python manage.py collect static, or if you don't want, watch this, it's going to ask me for input. Are you sure you want to continue? It's going to overwrite a bunch of files. I could type yes, or I could type python manage.py collect static no input. And it's not going to ask. It's just going to do it. Last but not least, we need to, if we do a git status here, we're going to see something interesting. We want to commit our front-end code, but our static code has all this admin stuff in it, and it's going to have a lot of other stuff in there as well as your application grows. We do not want to commit our static folder. What we do want to do is ignore that static folder and only ever commit the stuff that we've changed in our front-end folder. So let's open up our git ignore, and at the very bottom where it says media, let's type static. Let's do a git status once more, and it doesn't show up anymore. We are good to go. We have our static files up and running. So now we can write our JS in a file in our project, and we don't have to write it all in, well, internally. What I mean by that is if you're not a JavaScript developer, is we don't have to write our JavaScript in here. We don't have to do that. We can write all of our JavaScript in a file, and then we can apply caching to that so that your script either only loads or downloads once, or is at least really, really fast to load for your future website viewers. All right, let's go ahead and add jQuery. So first things first, let's just go to the jQuery.website. Is it jQuery.com? It is jQuery.com. Download jQuery, or instead of doing that, we could do jQuery CDN. And we're on version 3.5.1 right now, so let's go and get the most modern version. Is there a CDN in here? Oh, this is the CDN. Cool. Okay, so we want the minified version. We want full. So I'm going to do this. Actually, no. Let's not do it that way. Let's do CDN.js. And this is just going to let us copy the whole thing. So copy the script tag, and it's going to give us 3.5.1 jQuery.min.js. So it's been minified already, so all the spaces and stuff have been removed. And let's just throw that in front of our main.js. So our main.js can then execute any sort of jQuery. Next, for AJAX calls, we have this strange one, which I'm not going to walk through the entire thing. And so this is what it looks like. Before we do any sort of AJAX, we're going to set up our AJAX. And what this is going to do is look for, where are you? A CSRF token is going to set that cookie so that we don't have to set it on every single AJAX request. Now, I would highly recommend just downloading the source code and copying and pasting this and making sure that it's before your main.js. You could even throw it right inside of your main.js. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. Let's delete that, and let's go inside of our main.js and let's just throw that in here. And the idea here, again, is that, remember when we were trying to create a new post and we got that CSRF token error? Well, with AJAX, we don't know how to necessarily submit that. But CSRF tokens are cookies. And so we can set a cookie, or rather we can get the cookie, then we can set the request header to use X CSRF token so that in the future, when we make an AJAX request, we don't necessarily have to apply a CSRF token to all of our AJAX requests. Now there's a lot going on in here, and this is not a JavaScript module. Django 201 is not meant to cover a lot of JavaScript, just a little bit. But if you're unfamiliar with this, I would highly recommend checking out JavaScript 101, JavaScript 201, JavaScript 301, any one of my other JavaScript courses. So let's go back here and let's just make sure that things are loading the way we expect. Cool, we don't have a favicon, so that's totally fine. We now have jQuery and installed. And what we can do is right-click, inspect, go to console, and if we just type $, we should see something in there. We should be able to grab anything we want. So we could grab our entire body, and it gives us an object. And that's how you know jQuery is installed. Alternatively, you can always just type jQuery. Well, make sure you're actually typing it, jQuery, and you get the same thing as that $sign. Once you have jQuery installed, let's head on over to that next lesson. All right, let's take a look at toggling our modal. And a couple of lessons ago, we created a modal, and we need to basically make it show up. How do we make it show up? We're going to use JavaScript for that. So what we can do, first of all, is let's go into our, not our homepage, but our base.html. And where's a new post? This is a link. And let's give this a new class of JS toggle modal. And let's open up our front-end JS main.js, and let's just scroll on down to the bottom, and let's create a new event listener. So document.on.click, or not .click, just click, .js toggle modal, function e for event, e.prevent default. So if it's a link, don't go anywhere, don't do anything. And let's just say console.log, hello, I was clicked. Now, if you're unfamiliar with jQuery, you can always take my jQuery 101 class that will cover all of this as well. But for the time being, I'm going to assume that you know jQuery at this point. If you don't know jQuery, basically you are done this project. There's a little bit more we can add. You can skip ahead where we add a detail view for all of our profiles. But if you don't know jQuery, you don't have to worry about the Ajax stuff. So some of these lessons you can just skip through. So let's go ahead and open up our console. And every time I click this, it says, I was clicked. Hello, I was clicked. I clicked it 11 times. I'm going to click it 11 more times. And just keep saying I was clicked. So it's working. So what we need to do now is we need to, in our modal, in our base.html, we have JS modal. And we need to toggle this class hidden on and off. So we can now select that modal, toggle class, hidden. And let's just do this. Let's see if this works. There we go. That works. And now we need to figure out how to close this. So that SVG, we need to close it with that SVG. And we could apply the same thing here, JS toggle modal. And because all we're saying here is every time a class called JS toggle modal is clicked, that modal is going to toggle that class on and off. And because we can't click anything else outside of here, we can just simply click that X. And now it is toggling on and off for us. Okay, let's go ahead and start creating posts dynamically with Ajax and jQuery. So as a little reference, let's open up our base.html. And in our modal, that's our modal here, we want to add this Ajax form. And so we don't actually need to add a form at all because we know that this is already JavaScript powered. We don't have to make sure that it's not necessarily not JavaScript ready, so that we can assume safely everyone is using JavaScript. So let's add an input in here with, no, not an input. Let's do a text area, class, border 2, border blue 500. I believe that's going to do what I want. And let's say the rows, there's going to be 3 rows. And there's going to be some margin in there too. Margin, top and bottom of 6 pixels, or not 6 pixels. I think that's going to be 4 rems, 2 rems. I can't remember. Anyways, it's going to add some margin top, and we can always change that. If we don't like 4, we can always use 8 or 16 or something like that. Slash text area. And for JavaScript to be able to grab this, we need to add a JavaScript base class. I like to prefix my classes with just JS. So JS, new post. Nah, let's just call it post text. And we can get rid of that to do. Okay. We need to add some width in there. So width full. And that didn't do what I want, so let's go to Tailwind CSS docs. Type in width. And it's W full. Why did that not work for me? W full. Might be the parent element. There we go. Cool. So we have a text area in there. Let's add a placeholder as well. Placeholder. Enter your post. Let's also add a max length is equal to. And how long are these posts supposed to be as a maximum? Feed models 240 characters. So we're going to say this has a max length of 240 characters. So now what happens when we click this? Nothing. We need to make sure that something happens when we click create post. So when we click create post, which has a class of jrsubmit on it, we can work with that. We can say document.on, and I'm just chaining these together. Click .jssubmit function e.prevent default, because I don't want it to do whatever its natural thing is on the browser. And let's just say console.log submit me. Open. And there it is. Shows up. Submit me. Cool. So now we need to get this text. And before we do an Ajax, we need to get that text. So JS post text. That's what we want to grab. Let's go ahead and grab that text. Const text is equal to that element dot text. Nope, not dot text, it's dot val. And let's also trim it. And then we can say, if there is nothing in there, if no text dot length, if there is no post whatsoever, simply return false. Otherwise, let's grab that modal and let's hide it. So I'm going to grab that and hide it. Add class, hidden. And this is just going to confirm that this is actually going to work for me. So nothing happens. When I add some text in here, it closes for me. Cool. But now when I open it, that text is still in there. So we need to clear that out. So I'm not going to write pretty jQuery here, just because this is not a jQuery module. Django 201 is not meant to cover jQuery too much. We're just going to blow through a bunch of this using jQuery because it's nice and fast. And so we also want to select that post and give that val no value. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it clears it out for me. Good, 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 good. That's exactly what we want. Now, we need to send this data somewhere. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in some code here, and then I'm going to walk through it. I just don't want you to have to like spend the whole day watching me type. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to paste in some stuff, and we're going to adapt our code. So we wrote up to here. Everything below here is brand new. It's what I just pasted in. So btn prop disabled. Let's go ahead and, well, first of all, read through this. This is going to select the button. It's going to make it disabled, and it's going to make that text say posting. So we need to select that btn. So we can now say const btn is equal to this. That's that JS submit button. Then we're going to Ajax post. Text area is looking for a data type post URL. Let's do this. Data post URL is equal to a place. And we're going to see that this breaks, but that's okay. We can change that in a little bit. The data itself, text, is going to be text, and that's fine. And this is just going to make this accessible on the back end so that Python and Django can say, oh, just look up request.post.text, and it's going to be whatever our text is. So this is our key, this is our value. On success, we are going to return some HTML. We're then going to take that JS modal, and we're going to add a class hidden. We already did that. Let's go ahead and hide that. The text area, val nothing, we can replace that with what we wrote. And we're going to say post container append HTML. We don't have a post container. So the idea here is to make this look very, very dynamic. So if we go back to our HTML here, actually it's going to be in our home page. All of our posts need to be wrapped in this thing called posts container. It doesn't need to be called posts container. It can be called anything. I'm just calling it post container. Just whatever name you use, make sure it's consistent. So I'm using ID posts container. You're going to want to use ID posts container. And that's going to prepend the HTML, whatever that is. We don't know what that is yet. On error console, warn that there was an error, and then change that button state from disabled to false, so it's not disabled anymore, and change the text inside of that button to say that there was an error. Now this should trigger the error for us. So let's go ahead and give this a try. Let's click on new post. Hello world. It says it's posting. Text area is not defined. Text area is not defined, and that's because we didn't set it there. What we can do is just this, because this is the text area right here. So this is going to get our text area, and then the data property, the data attribute, data-post-URL. And this is using jQuery again. Here we go. Cool. So we get an error in here. And basically localhost port 8000/a place doesn't exist. And that's getting it from right in here. So we need to give this a URL of some kind. So where should this go? Well, we have a view already set up. So let's go ahead and minimize some of this stuff. In our feed/views, we have a create new post view. In here, we can simply say, if there is a post request, something along these lines, def post, self request, args, quargs, return, let's say, a thing in here. And this is not actually going to return anything that we want, not yet anyways. This isn't going to return HTML or anything. This is just an example so far. But because we can use this URL, we can go over to our URLs here, create new post, and we can use feed::new post. So let's go in here, let's add URL, feed::new post. And that's going to make sure that we are in fact logged in. So if I right click, go to definition, it's going to make sure that we're logged in with that login required mixin. And when we post, it's going to do something. So this should break for me, but let's do this as an example anyways. This is a post request. And this is going to spam my console in the bottom left here. Let's go ahead and refresh this. Hello world, this is not going to actually work. It went to a different location this time. It went to /new. That's exactly what we set up. So let's check out that URL in there. URL /new/. That's exactly where we wanted it to go. And here it is. This is a post request. This is a post request. So we know that this is working. Now we need to do some post processing in here. What can we do to create a new post object? So in here, because we already have post imported, we could say the post is going to be post.objects.create. The text is going to be request.post.text. Nope, that's wrong. Request.post.getText. And the author is going to be request.user. Because we have access to that request object in here, we don't need to use self.request. Now where I'm getting that text from is in main.js, not necessarily this one, but this one. It's the key we're getting, and it's going to get this value, whatever that value is. It just happens to be that they're named the same thing. We could name them differently if we wanted to. And lastly, let's render some HTML. So let's return render. It always takes request as its first parameter. And then it needs to take a string as a parameter to which particular template we want to use. So let's include or includes /post.html. If we go to includes /post.html, we want to render all of this in here. And what this is going to do is it's going to use this block for a third time. So it's going to be used on the home page, it's going to be used on the detail page, and when we Ajax a new post in here, it's going to show up at the very top with this exact styling and everything. Lastly, we need to give it some context. So that new post is going to be post, and that new post comes from post.html. We're looking for this name right here, post. That's the context we're throwing in. And it's going to match this new post up here. So it's going to have text, date, and author. Now on our home page, we also have show detail link is equal to true. Because we're on the home page, we want to pass that in as well. So show detail link, we're going to make that true. Lastly, we want to set that content type is going to be application/HTML. Now we haven't imported render yet. So we need to go ahead and import render. And that comes from, this is an easy one to remember, Django.shortcuts import render. And let's make sure our Django is not complaining down here. We don't have any complaints yet. Okay, are we ready to test this? This was a lot to go through. Let's make sure that this is working the way we expect. Otherwise, it's going to break. Will this break? And if it breaks, we'll just fix all the bugs one by one, as we normally do as developers. Look at that. Will this break? Read more is going to go to ID number 6. I posted it just now. And that works perfectly. Let's go ahead and make sure that we can do this one more time. One more time. And let's open this up and make sure that that was all closed and everything. It says new post. Oh, this is good. Good things are happening here. We now have an Ajax request that is sending data to a dynamic URL. And so let's go over this once more. When someone clicks JS submit, we're going to grab that text. We're going to make sure that that text has a length. If there is no length, skip it. Then we're going to grab that button, which is this particular button, that button that you just clicked. We're going to say it is in fact disabled, and we're going to change the text to posting. This just makes sure that people can't click it twice. Then we set up Ajax, and actually Ajax was set up already to acknowledge that it needs to look for a CSRF token, so we don't need to do anything beyond that. We're going to say that type is post, and if we go in here, that matches def post. That URL is going to be JS post text .data post URL, and that's going to come from our base.html. Nope. Yep. Yeah, that's where our text area is. So JS post text, that's our class, is going to grab that, and it's going to grab data post URL, and we're throwing in a Django URL, so it's completely dynamic. This way we don't have to put any sort of hard-coded URL inside of our JavaScript. We can change it on the Django end, redeploy our application, and this will always work for us. So it's a sort of future-proofing our JavaScript. Then we said, what kind of data are we sending to our Python backend? And we said, send the text. And the text is coming from request post.get text. And the text value is going to be whatever our post was. Upon success, we're going to return HTML data, which is down here. Render HTML data. We're actually going to render the includes post.html. And we're going to throw in some context. Post is post, and show detail link is equal to true. And when this is successful, JS modal is going to be then hidden. The posts container, which comes from our homepage here, post container, we're going to prepend that data HTML, whatever comes back from Django, whatever comes back from in here, we're going to prepend that, so put it to the top of our list. Then we're going to say that same button that we clicked, disabled is going to be false, so it's clickable again, and we're just going to say new post. And then we're going to take that JS post text, that text area, and we're going to empty it so that someone can make another post right away and it doesn't look like their old data is still lingering around. Upon error, we're going to console warn that error, and we're going to say that that button that we clicked is going to be disabled. Nope, it's not going to be disabled anymore. And that text is just simply going to say error. And that's all we need to do. Now, if you're not super familiar with jQuery or JavaScript, that's okay. You can always just download the source code and have some fun with this. You don't have to necessarily know all of this code. but feel free to explore and do whatever you like. And honestly, you can totally break this code and just re-download it later and it'll work for you. All right, let's go ahead and add a profile detail view. So first things first, we need to open up our profiles. Profile URLs. Oh, look at that. We don't have that. So let's go into our profile app and create a new file called urls.py. And in here, we need to, from Django.urls, import path, and from import views, because we're going to be using that in just a second. We want to give this an app name of profiles. This is going to help us with name spacing down the road. URL patterns is going to be a path, and this is going to send the user to mywebsite.com/profile/ let's take a string, and that's going to be the username. That's what we're going to call it, is username, when we use it in our view. And let's make this render views.profile detail view, which we don't have yet, but that's okay. We'll make that in just a moment. And the name is going to be detail. And notice how we have this recurring named pattern. Detail here, we've got post detail as well, but our posts is called feed detail, and our profiles is going to be called profiles detail. All right, let's save that and watch Django complain that there isn't a file in here called profile detail view. Actually, it's not going to complain because it doesn't know about it yet. So let's go into our main URLs file here, and let's do from profiles import URLs as profiles URLs. And let's basically copy over our path here, and we're going to use profiles URLs, and that namespace is going to be profiles. Now what we can do instead is we can say profile with a slash, come up here and get rid of this. That's not going to be required because it's going to prefix it with profile anyways. And then it's going to be yourwebsite.com/profile/ and then the username of that person. So now we can see that Django has recognized that, and it's complaining that there is no profile detail view. So let's go over to our views, and we need to create this profile detail view. So let's get rid of this because we're going to be using class-based view. So we can do from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. We've done this before. From Django.views.generic import a detail view. And then we need to create a class here called profile detail view because that's what the URL was looking for in our URL patterns. And this is going to be a detail view. Now we're going to say HTTP method names is equal to get. I just like putting that in there, knowing that if someone's going to read this, that they're not supposed to be accepting any sort of post or put or delete or any sort of view. It's literally just a get request. The template name is going to be profiles/detail.html, and our model is going to be a user. Then we have our context object name. I tend to always set this so it's not just object in our template, because in our template it would look like this, object.username. Instead, what I like to do is set this as something a little more useful. So I'm going to call this user, and in our template we could use user.username instead. Just makes a little bit more sense when you're reading the code. Lastly, we need a slug field is equal to the username, and the slug URL keyword argument, kwarg, is going to be username. And so that slug field is how are we going to look up this user? By what slug? And we're going to say look up the user by the username. And that slug URL keyword arg, the kwarg, is going to come from right here, username. So we're saying this accepts a string and it's going to be a username. And that's going to be our keyword argument. Then that keyword argument can be passed here and we can find a user that way. Now we don't have to write all sorts of ORM queries, object relational management queries. We don't have to look for a user manually. This is just going to do it for us. So let's open up post.html and we don't need that anymore. Where's our to-do? We need to create a new URL in here. So open up our syntax, URL. Profiles was the namespace we use, so we're going to use that in a string. We use profiles, detail, and this accepts what as its parameter? A string. So then we can simply put post.author.username. And that's going to act as our string. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's refresh our page and see if there's any errors or complaints. And this is going to go to localhost port 8000. You can see this at the bottom left, /profile/Caleb. Now, if I go here, we're going to see that the template doesn't exist, but this is good enough. This works for us. In the next lesson, let's go ahead and create a new profile template. Okay, in the last lesson, we created a profile detail view, and we said use a template called profiles/detail. So if we go to profiles, let's create a new folder in here called templates/profiles. That's going to be our namespacing for our template, and then detail.html. And let's just call this detail view in here, just to make sure that this is working, that there isn't any typos. And so let's go back here. And if I click on my animated face, it says profiles detail.html does not exist. So one of two things happened here. Either I have a template, not a template, but I have a typo somewhere. So let's double check that. Profiles, yeah, /detail, that looks okay. The second thing is Django might just not know about it, might need to be restarted. Let's try this. And in fact, Django just needed to be restarted. That's all it was. So let's go ahead and start editing this. We're going to say this extends from base.html. Block title is going to be user, and I'm getting that from our context object name, user.username. And block body is going to have some stuff in here. Let's just make sure that this works as well. Cool. This is all working. Have some stuff in here. It says Caleb up there. This is looking good. I have another component I want to use, a Tailwind component, and it's this one here. So let's go ahead and look at the source code. And yeah, this is what I want. So let's go ahead and select all that and copy it. And I'm just going to paste that in here. And cool, we have a profile name. So let's go ahead and start editing some of this stuff. We can throw in an image. We can put in a name or a username, number of posts, number of followers, and we can get rid of that. And we're not going to do too much with this. We're not going to extend this all the way, but if you wanted to, you could add like a background photo and let users change their photos and things like that. So instead of Olivia Dunham, let's say user.username. Let's get rid of that one. Cool. Let's say how many posts does this user have? XX, and let's add a to-do, add total posts. And let's look for followers, which we haven't created any followers yet, but we're going to in just a little bit. To do, add total followers. Good enough. Now we need to go and add that image in there. And what we can do is we can reference not our homepage, but our post.html. So we know that we need to load our thumbnail, and we know that it's going to look like this. So I'm honestly just going to copy this, load the thumbnail in there, and where is that image? That image is going to be right here. And I just pasted that from my clipboard. And so this isn't going to be post.author.profile image. This is going to be user.profile.image. And is it looking for 372 by 372? Actually, that's not right. That's supposed to be 373 by 373. Might as well fix that while we're at it. And how big is this image? We don't actually know. So let's make it a 200 by 200. Let's see if that works. And I'm just going to move the original source image up and simply replace the URL. And I just deleted the old one, the one that I originally pasted in. So im.url. Okay, not bad, not bad. My face is a little big there. Let's try 100 by 100. That's better. And so now when someone makes a post like this, you can actually see their profile. Now again, you can extend this as much as you like. You can add a new background image in there. You can let them change their background image, all sorts of stuff. The only other thing we're really going to be doing in this particular course is we're going to be adding number of posts, number of followers, and then be able to actually follow and unfollow people. So next up, let's add the total number of posts to this page. All right, so if we just take a look here at our profile page, it says X posts and X followers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to add X posts, and I'm going to leave a to-do in here so that you can add your own number of followers. So let's go ahead and open up our editor. And where it says X posts, we need to put total number of posts in there. So let's just do this. Total post. We're going to set ourselves up for success. We're going to write total posts in there, but now we need to add this in because if we refresh, it doesn't say anything. So what we can do is in our view, in our profiles/views.py file, we can say def get context data self and any sort of keyword args that it might take. Let's grab the context. So we're going to say super.get context data, pass in any sort of kwargs that might have been passed into us, and return context. Now to get something, we could say, or to not get something, but to add something to our template, to add some new context to our template, we could say context. What do we call this? We called it total posts. Total posts is equal to, wow, hello. And that's it. That's all we're going to do. Wait for Django to restart, flip over, and it's going to say, wow, hello posts. Now, that's working. That's getting something from the back end, but it's not really dynamic. Let's make it dynamic by collecting the number of posts. So we need to import this from feed.models import post. And then we can say post.objects filter by the author. The author is going to be whoever this particular user is. Count. Now we don't know who this user is because the user is an unassigned variable in this method right now. So let's go ahead and create that user variable. And that's simply going to come from self.getObject. And so if I can spell that right, get object is going to get this user object. So it's going to look up a user, it's going to look it up by its username, and it's going to match it with the username that's in the URL. If it finds a user, that user is then going to be, for example, Caleb or Test or you or your teacher or a chair if you wanted to, or some sort of meme account. And so what we're saying here is all the post objects, filter them by the author, make sure that author is whoever this current user is on this profile page, and then count all those posts. And let's refresh, and I have 6 posts. Is that correct? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In fact, I do have 6 posts. And so that is how we add that in there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you figure out how to add followers in there. Now, we don't have a followers app yet, so you don't have to do it right now, but I'm going to add a to-do in here. Total followers. And you're going to have to figure out how to add the followers in there. I'm going to add a to-do in here too. Add total followers. I already have that in there, so I'm going to leave that for you. Okay, let's get ready to start being able to follow people. So what we want to do here is we need some sort of follow button. Right now there's no action. You can see someone's account, but you can't actually follow them. So let's go ahead and add a follow button. So right underneath where it says Caleb, or whatever the username is, your username is going to be different. I'm going to add a little button. And so I open up Profiles Detail, and I look for my username in here. And I'm going to paste in a button. And this button, we've actually seen this button before. This button, I'm going to show you, looks a lot like that button, doesn't it? So all I did was just copy that. And what I want to do here is make sure that I have some JavaScript attached to it. So the type is not going to be submit, the type is simply going to be a button. And in fact, it doesn't need to be a button. It could be a URL, or not a URL, but an A tag as well. So an anchor tag if you wanted to. I'm going to use a button. And I'm going to say this is called JS follow. And we need to eventually figure out who this is going to follow. So data.username is equal to user.username. And this is going to allow our JavaScript to figure out who this user is. We could use a user ID if we wanted to, or a username. It doesn't really matter, just some unique way of looking up the user. And I'm going to set this text in here, so JS follow text. And again, we're just setting ourselves up for future JavaScript, well, selectors. So we can select this particular node, or we can select this particular node, and we can make sure that something actually happens. Let's go ahead and let's make sure that this doesn't show up if the user is not logged in. So if request.user.is authenticated, then they can see this button. Otherwise, let's say class of margin top 3, no, I did that wrong, .mt-3, login to follow this user, else, and end that. There we go. Okay, looks like it did nothing. That's good. Let's open up new private browsing. Login to follow this user. That text is a little too big. Can we make that text smaller? Text small. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. And because I'm logged in here, I can already do this. Now, I don't want to be able to follow myself, so let's wrap this in one more if statement as well. So what we can do here is if you are logged in, yep, great. You need to be able to check to see if you are comparing against yourself. So let's say if the request.user is not the current user, then show this. Otherwise, it's not going to show anything at all. There we go. That doesn't work. Or rather, it's not supposed to work, but it doesn't show up for me. Let's go and see test account. See if I can follow test account. I can follow test account. Cool, cool, cool. But I'm not allowed to follow myself. That's good news. We don't want to be able to follow ourselves because then our feed's just going to be full of our own stuff anyways. All right, we're talking about followers. We need to be able to follow people and track who's following who. So let's go ahead and create a new app called followers. So in my terminal here, I'm going to type python manage.py start app followers. And on my left, you're going to see a new folder called followers. Let's go into our settings.py and our installed apps, and let's add followers in here somewhere. Doesn't really matter where at this point. Called followers. Django's going to restart. Everything looks okay. Let's open up our followers and let's go to models.py and let's create our new model here. So let's call this a follower. Class follower is a models.model model. Models.model model. Interesting way of saying that. And then we have followed by is equal to models.foreign key user on delete. We haven't imported user yet, but that's okay. Models.cascade. So whenever the followed by user is deleted, we're going to delete this relationship. And let's give it a related name. Related name is going to be followed by, because actually I'm going to comment that out. I'm going to show you why we need to do that in just a second. Then we need to see who that person is following is equal to models.foreign key. This is also going to be a user. On delete is equal to models.cascade. So when we delete this particular user, it's also going to delete this relationship. So if you delete the account that you are following, or that person deletes their own account, then it's going to delete this relationship. Otherwise, if the person who is following you deletes their account, it's also going to delete that relationship as well. So this is a followed by to following relationship. Let's give this a string, def string, so it has a string representation. Return some sort of f string. We can do self.followed.by.id, whatever that user ID is following self.following.id. And let's also give this a class meta. And let's say unique together is going to be followed by and following. So this is going to create a unique index so you can see if someone is following you, if you're following them, and that there can only ever be one, so that you can't follow people over and over and over and over and over again. And let's just make sure that that is a tuple. Or a tuple? I don't know. Sometimes it's tuple, sometimes it's tuple. Yeah, okay. Name user is not defined. Let's head back on up. From Django.contrib.auth.models import user. And let's take a look at what this is saying here. Let's scoot this over. And it says, and this is why we are going to be adding related names in here. It says, followed by clashes with reverse accessor for follower.following. So these are basically conflicting in the land of Django magic. What we can do to avoid this, if you ever see something like that, is we can simply give this a related name, and we'll give this one a related name. And we'll just call it following and follower, or followed by and following. And that error goes away. Next up, we need to make migrations, and also need to spell that properly. And then migrate. Cool. So we have that in there. Let's also register this with our admin. We've done this before. And so let's go into our feed. We're going to copy that admin. Followers, go to our admin here, paste that in there. And instead of importing from models and getting post, we want to get follower. That's what we called this model in here, follower. And let's just select all of these. Django should restart. There should be no problems. Now let's go back over to our admin, and we're going to be able to see we have a new app in here called followers, and there's no one following anyone. And I can select Caleb to follow test, save and add another. Let's try this. Caleb is going to follow test again, and save. And it says follower with this followed by and following already exists, so only one can ever exist. And so that is a unique constraint on our database, and Django will enforce that for us. So at this point in time, you should have a follower Django application. All right, we need a way to follow and unfollow a user. So if we open up our app, I can follow this test account. But when I click it, it does nothing. So we need that to do something. We need some sort of interactivity. Then we need to AJAX that data to and from the server. So we need to send data to the server and accept data from the server and change the word follow to following or unfollow or anything like that. We might also want to change the number of followers in there. So I'm going to leave that up to you because I haven't purposely done that. I'm going to leave that up to you. But if you wanted to in JavaScript, you could dynamically update that as well. And then once we're done with that, we're going to change our home page to make sure that we're only showing posts that are relevant to us from people we are following. So let's go ahead and work on this. We have to open up profile detail.html. And we have this, JS follow. And so we want to write some JavaScript with that. So let's go into our front end, main.js, and let's add another event listener in here. So whenever you click that, function e.prevent default, and that's just going to prevent a link from going anywhere or a button from submitting a form, console.log, clicked. And we just want to make sure that this works. Cool, clicked. Now let's go ahead and collect some data as well. So we need to, what I can do is maybe split this. No, that's too crowded. Okay, let's unsplit that. So in our detail.html, whenever you click follow, there's a username and there's should be some sort of action. So we can do data action is equal to follow or unfollow. That's what it's going to be. Let's go ahead and get that username and let's get that action. We also need a data URL, somewhere to actually Ajax this data from, or to rather. And so that's going to be URL, profiles, follow, and we're going to say user.username. Now this isn't going to exist, so when we load up our template, this is going to give us an error. Just like that, reverse for follow not found. And so like all Django things, we sort of need to do multiple things all at once. And so let's go into our profiles and let's go into our URLs. Let's just copy this and put follow at the end and profile detail view. Let's go follow view. Now that follow view doesn't exist, so let's go into our URL, or our views, not our URLs. And let's do class follow view. And we don't want this to really be anything special. We just want this to be a regular view. But we also need to make sure that this is logged in, that the user is logged in. So login required view, and I don't believe that's in here yet. So where did we put that? Feed, views, we scroll up here, we can just go over here. I'm literally just gonna copy and paste that. Copy, paste. And instead of detail view, we're going to add a view in here. And last but not least, Python doesn't like empty lines. It says login required view. Oh, no, it's because it's not a view, it's a mixin. There we go, Django is no longer complaining. So first things first, what we need to do is we need to make sure that our template loads. Let's refresh this. Template still does not load. Wonder why it's not doing that. It's because I didn't call it the right thing. I copied and pasted. That was a copy pasta problem. When you copy and paste, don't do what I do. Always make sure you read through everything you copied and pasted. Okay, let's make sure this works. Let's inspect this and see what we have in here. We have a button with a data URL, a data action, data username, and we know that when we click it, it's going to be clicked. So now we need to do something. We need to collect some data here. So let's go back into, I'm going to close some of these, into our main.js. And where we have this Ajax file, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this entirely. Boom. And we're going to write a very, very simple one here. We're not going to do a lot of processing or JavaScript validation rather. So what kind of data do we want to send? We want to send the action. It's going to be some sort of action. So because it's on this JS follow button, which is right there, it's a property on here. We can say this. This.attr data action. And the reason I'm using data action instead of .data and then just putting action in there, I'll show you that there's two different ways to write this. Data action is going to be cached. This is not going to work for you if we change it in the future, which we are going to do. Whereas attr attribute data action is not going to be cached and it's going to look it up every single time. So that's just a nice little way around that caching problem. We need to check a username. So username is going to be this.data username. We can use data here because it's not going to be a problem if it's cached. This username is never going to be changed, whereas the action here will change from follow to unfollow to follow to unfollow, but the username is never going to change. Username is going to be the same on every profile detail view. Last, we need the data URL, and that's going to come from Django. That's going to be rendered right in our template, and we're going to make sure that JavaScript is dynamic. And so we are going to change this URL to this.data URL. That's what I call it, right? URL? Yep. And let's just make sure that there is a comma after that. So basically we're going to say, go to this URL, wherever that is. We could change that on the Django backend and JavaScript won't care in the future. The action is going to be either follow or unfollow. The username is going to be whatever that username is on that page. And let's go ahead and get rid of this stuff because we don't need that. We're just going to keep this one nice and simple. This one's not going to return data HTML. This one's going to return just regular data in the form of JSON, as we usually expect in an AJAX request. Okay, so let's save this, and let's just see what happens here. Let's click it. And we get a 405 method not allowed. Cool. So that means we can actually do something with this. That means that our endpoint is working. So let's go back to, where is our views? Not in feed. We're not in front end. Profile, views. HTTP method names. And we're going to say that the only method name that's allowed here is post. Let's try this again. And this time we get a method not allowed as well. That's actually okay. I think what we're looking for here is, if I remember correctly, def post, self, request, args, and quargs. And we just want to return something in here. So let's return a JSON response of done is equal to true. We need to import that JSON response. From Django.http import JSON response. Okay, let's try this out. Okay, it seems like it's doing everything. Let's turn on XHR here. Oh, look at that. We're getting 200s now. This is good. Every time we click it, we're getting a 200. So what we want to do here is we want to say data is equal to request.post.dict, because I like working with dictionaries. Then we can say if action not in data or username not in data, return an HTTP response bad request. I'm going to copy that so I don't have to typo that 300 times again in the future. And I'm just going to say missing data. And that comes from HTTP as well. And so what this is going to say is if someone tries to access this URL, even if they are logged in, it's going to be looking for an action and a username. And so if they're missing that, they're going to get a bad response. Now let's go ahead and try to find this user. So let's do try the other user is equal to user.objects.get, and then that username is going to be data username, and that's coming from our AJAX request. The data object is our AJAX request, and this is the username on our user object. Is user imported? In fact, it is. That's good news. And let's accept this. If the user does not exist, so if someone's trying to be malicious and they're, being pretty good at being malicious, let's say the user does not exist exception, and return an HTTP response bad request. And missing user. Or we could 404 or whatever you want to do there. So now we can say, if data action is equal to follow, else unfollow. And I like to leave little comments in here so that people know what I'm doing when they read the source code. And so if the idea here is that you're supposed to follow someone, let's do a get or create. So we can say the follower and created, because this is going to return a tuple, is equal to follower.objects.get or create. And we're going to say followed by is equal to the request.user, and following is the other user. And that other user is coming from right up here. And I am personally making that request to follow someone, so I'm going to say that that person is followed by me, or the request.user. That's how I got that logic. It's a little bit confusing at first, but it makes more sense when you work with it a little bit here and there. Otherwise, we want to unfollow that person. So follower is equal to follower.objects.get followed by is equal to request.user, and following is equal to the other user. So let's see if we can get that person. Let's try this though, because that following might not exist. So that we need to accept that. And we can say follower does not exist, pass. Or we could say follower is equal to none. And then down here we can say if there was a follower that was found, follower.delete. Then in our JSON response, we could say, done is true, or usually success is true, or something like that. And then we can say we want to return some wording. Wording is going to be unfollow, and this is going to be the wording that we put back into the DOM. So unfollow if data action is equal to follow, and this is a ternary statement in Python, else follow. So if someone is following someone, we're going to return the wording unfollow. Otherwise, if someone is unfollowing someone, return the word follow. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in here. We can do console.log data. And we get an internal server error. Okay, let's go and see what kind of error we have. Follower is not defined. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. We're going to have to go and import that. From followers.models import follower. Let's refresh. Let's go ahead and follow. And it says success was true, wording unfollow. Now let's go into our followers in here. One is following two. I personally, Caleb, am one. Test is two. We see that? Caleb and test. Let's go ahead and delete this. Let's just make sure that this is working. Let's click it again. Refresh our admin. There it is. Now we need to switch that. So if someone is being followed, you need to unfollow them. And if someone is not being followed or is being unfollowed, you need to be able to follow them again. So we go into our main.js here, and our button, we could say this.text is going to be data.wording. Let's go and see what this looks like now. When I refresh this, unfollow. And oh, that actually changed too much of what I want. I still want that button and everything. I want JS follow text to change, but I want that SVG to stay in there. So let's not do this, but let's select this particular node. There we go, unfollowing. We also need to change this action in here. This action, where are you? Follow needs to be unfollow. So what we can say here is if the action is equal to follow, change wording to unfollow, else the opposite. And so we could say this, because we're not using functions in here. We're using arrow functions. So we're not using functions with this keyword. We're actually tricking jQuery a little bit here. We can keep using this in reference to JS follow. This .attr data action is going to be unfollow. Otherwise, it's going to be. And let's just make sure that this works. So we have username test. Data action is supposed to be follow and unfollow in here. Let's go ahead and click it. And it's not doing what I expected to do. Why are you not doing that? Let's debug this. Console.log debug. Unfollow. Follow. Action is not defined, and that's because I put it up here. Let's turn this into a variable. There we go. Const action is equal to whatever the action is equal to action. And then we can say if that action is equal to follow, yada yada. Okay, let's see if this works now. That should work better. There we go. It changes from follow to unfollow. Now, one last thing we need to do, and we're going to do this in the next lesson, is we need to see if I'm currently following someone, I need to change that button and that default action from follow to unfollow. So we're going to do that in the next lesson. Alrighty, we need to see if someone is following someone or not. So if I do this, go over to followers. Cool. So it does say I'm following when I refresh this page. It doesn't say that I'm following them. It wants me to follow them. It's prompting me to follow someone. And this actually needs to be the opposite. And so what we need to do is we need to go into our views.py and our profile detail view. We need to add some context in here. So we need to say if request.user.is authenticated, the context of you follow is equal to follower.objects.filter. And who am I following? This particular user, which we have set up here. User is equal to self.getObject. And followed by is equal to myself. So request.user. And then we just need to see if this exists. Does this exist? And this, instead of saying filter and could possibly get multiple lines, it's just simply going to say, does it exist? Yes or no? And it's going to return true or false. Now here's the thing, request.user does not exist. We don't have a request in get context data, so we need to add this into our dispatch. So def dispatch self request args quargs and return super dot dispatch request args and quargs. And all we want to do here is say self.request is equal to that request object. And now instead of saying request down here, we can say if self.request.user is authenticated, and we can do the same thing here if self.requestUser.exists, say you follow. Now in our detail view, we can say, we can change the wording in here. Give us some space to work inside of the span. If you follow, unfollow, else, follow, and if. And let's see if this works. There we go. Am I following this person? I am following this person. It now wants me to unfollow. But now there's one more thing we need to do in here, is we need to change this action. And so we can say, if following, if you follow, rather, let's just prefix this with the word un, and if. So it's either going to be follow or unfollow. Let's unfollow and delete. And we see that the following was deleted. And if I go back and follow again, and just refresh my admin, it shows up. And one more example, unfollow, and it goes away. Just like that, we now have a following. We can follow multiple people. Now here's the thing, is if I follow this person and go back here, it still just shows up whatever posts are in here. We need to change that. We need to actually go in there and modify whose posts we are seeing. And we're going to do that in the next lesson. All right, we are nearing the end here. So what we need to do is we need to customize our homepage feed. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open up our feed views, and we have this homepage list view. And there's a couple different ways we can do this. We can overwrite the query set here by writing def get query set self, doing a bunch of stuff in there, which is probably the proper way of doing it, but I want to take a slightly different approach. And I want to convert this from a list view to a simple template view. And so let's go and change this list view to a template view by importing that. And I don't think there's anything else on here other than, okay, what I was looking for was another list view. I can delete this. Now, here's the thing, is even if I delete this and Django stops complaining, there's no more query set for us. There's no more model. We have to go and and there's also no more posts. So we actually have to go and delete these and add it to our context. So we can do def get context data, self request, args, and quargs. Context is equal to super.get context data request args and quargs. Return that context. Now we can say context posts is equal to, I think that's what we called it. Let's say, oop, I made that too small there. Homepage, yep, we called it posts. So we need to add that to our context. Post.objects.all. Get context data, missing one required positional argument request. Oh, okay. We don't have request in our get context data. That was a little bit of a brain fart I had there. Wait for it to reload. Okay. So I think these are actually in reverse order. Yeah, these are in reverse order now. So we need to change that as well. And we need to see if someone is logged in to dynamically change these posts. So first of all, let's do this. Let's delete that. And let's say if self.request.user.is authenticated, following is going to be a customized list. Otherwise, not following, that's supposed to be. Post is going to be a customized list, and posts, otherwise, if someone is not logged in, is simply going to be posts.objects.all.order by ID, and let's show the first 30 like we originally did. Now self.request is not defined yet, so we have to do def dispatch self request args quargs return super dot dispatch request args and quargs, and self dot request is going to be requestion is equal to request, and that allows us to use self dot request in here. So now if someone is logged in, we don't know what those posts are supposed to be. We need to get a list of all of our followers. So let's say a list of who we are following. So following is equal to follower.objects.filter, and the people who are followed by me, or self.request.user. And this is going to give us a giant query set. Now we don't want a giant query set. We just want a list of these users. So we can do .values list following. We just want the list of all the people we're following. And we want to make sure that this is flat. And let's print that out. Print following. I'm going to comment this line out so it doesn't complain when I load the template. And let's reload that. It'll show nothing. And by nothing, I mean it's going to show an import error. Yep, that's expected. So let's do this. From followers.models import follower. Now let's reload this. And we should see that there are no posts in there. And down here we should see something. A query set of 2. Now we don't want that to be a query set and it just says 2 in there. We want this to be a list. So we can typecast this as a list if we wanted to. And in fact, let's put this on multiple lines just because Python lets us do that. Now what we can say is posts. Copy this whole thing, but instead of all, we can do filter. And we can say that author is in a list of following. And instead of getting 30, if you're logged in, let's go ahead and show 60. And let's go ahead and make sure that this works. And that did not work for me, and that's because I didn't throw posts into my context. Context. Posts is equal to posts, and that context, that post, is coming from right there. Right here. That's important. There's nothing to loop through if we don't add it to the context. There we go. Let's go ahead and click on that guy's name, unfollow, go to home. There's nothing there. Now, one more thing. If there is nothing there, what do we show? So let's say, if this list is empty, so if not following, show the default 30, else the posts are going to be a little bit more dynamic. Here we go. Default 30. Let's do this. There we go. And that worked. That shows everybody's post, the last 30. Let's go ahead and follow. Well, I can't follow myself. Doesn't show up. It's not an option for me. But what I can do is I can follow this person, go back home, and it changes my list for me. So now we have a working application. We can get rid of this as well. That's not of any use. And so now we have a working application. There are some bits and bobs that I would like you to work on, though. I'm going to tell you about those in your project in the next lesson. Okay, hello and welcome to your final project. In your final project, well, this whole Django 201 has been a large project in itself, but I left a few things open for interpretation. And so, for instance, if I go to Caleb, it's going to show you that I have XX followers. You need to fill that in. How many followers do you have? Another thing I would like you to do is a little bit of front-end work. So when you log in, you need to actually change these templates so that they look a little bit nicer, because right now they don't look very nice, but that's completely up to you. The other thing I would like you to do is, once you are logged in, I want you to add a new section in here that allows the user to update their first name, last name, their username, their password, and maybe upload an image. Now, if you don't know where to get started with the image upload, we covered that in Django 101, so you might want to reference that once more. Actually, we covered all of that in Django 101. You can use a model form or you can use a regular form and manually update the user information. But either way, I would like you to create a new little account area here where someone can change their username, password, first name, last name, and their avatar. That's going to require a little bit of Googling, a little bit of research, a little bit of reading the Django docs, and this is all real life experience because once you have a job as a web developer, you are not going to be having your hand held anymore. And a client is going to say, hey, I need a particular feature, and unfortunately, you're going to have to go and learn how to figure out how to solve that feature. You might as well get that experience right now while you're learning. And if you really, really want to, what you could do is you could try to make this mobile responsive. If you're more of a front-end person with more front-end knowledge than back-end knowledge, you could always try to make this a responsive page. Because right now, I don't believe this is actually too responsive, if responsive at all. So it doesn't look good on mobile, but you might want to go ahead and make it look good on mobile. When you're done that, don't forget to share your project with the rest of the class, especially me. I want to see what you're working on. I want to see how it turns out for you. But most of all, have some fun with this, and don't forget to push yourself. It's important to push yourself because that's how you grow. And don't forget to share your final project and your final outcome with the rest of the class, and especially me. I really like seeing everybody's work. Show it down below. I would love to take a look.